Chapter 11:21. Without these 4 shock absorbers, their carriage was just a normal carriage. As for this beautiful carriage, it was very smooth and the materials used were very light. Adding in these 4 shock absorbers, it was like adding wings to a tiger. Shui Fang's expressionless face couldn't help revealing a faint smile. He stroked the horse's mane and praised, "Good horse." Then he began to install the shock absorbers. Xiaoru clapped her hands and said with a smile, "Ha, ha, young miss, do you think that hateful girl will spit out blood from anger if she knows the truth? Mr. Godly Doctor, you're really good, helping my young miss vent her anger like this." Gu Qingze did not look at Xiaoru and said to Chen Ning, "You are the person I like. If she wants to bully you, has she asked for my permission?" "What?" Hearing this, Xiaoru and Shui Feng were shocked. Their eyes popped out and their jaws dropped, not daring to believe their ears. The shock absorber in Shui Feng's hand fell to the ground and hit his foot, but he did not notice it at all. Did they hear wrong? What did this godly doctor say? He was in love with the Empress. The two of them had expressions like they had been struck by lightning. Mr. Godly Doctor, what did you just say? You're in love with my young miss. Xiaoru came back to her senses after a while and asked in a stuttering voice. Shui Fang's eyes turned cold and his right hand formed a fist. His heart was filled with rage. Even if he admired this godly doctor, he would not allow him to have any ideas about the Empress. "That's right, I'm in love with her." Gu Qingze impatiently said, "Chen girl, have you thought it over? This is a chance that others can't get even if they beg for it. Only a little girl like you is making excuses and not feeling happy at all." Chen Ning said, "Didn't you give me 3 days to think it over? It hasn't even been a day, let me think it over. I feel that your actions suit my taste, that's why I'm interested in you. Aren't you afraid I'll change my mind?" Gu Qingze rolled his eyes at her. Xiaoru and Shui Feng were stunned listening to this question and answer. Xiaoru's face turned red. "Young miss, why do you need to think about it? Don't even think about it. Just directly reject it. Have you forgotten, you've already..." She suddenly stopped talking. Shui Feng glared at Gu Qingze. Who did he think he was? Just by relying on his medical skills, did he want the Empress? With Shui Feng here, he shouldn't even think about it. Chen Ning looked down and thought about it. Then she looked up and said, "All right, I promise you." Gu Qingze's eyes lit up, but before he could say anything, he heard little Ru scream. "Young miss, how can you agree? Young miss, how can you agree to him? You've already been married." Wind-chasing wolf clenched his fists so hard that they creaked. He took a step toward Gu Qingze. In the next moment, he was prepared to send his fist to the tip of the hemp-clothed youth's nose and beat him until his face blossomed. Chen Ning strangely looked at Xiaoru. "I've married someone, so can't I have a master?" Chen. Feng Chen. Feng master. While the two of them were astonished, they simultaneously heaved a sigh of relief. Shui Feng quietly loosened his fist and secretly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He looked at Gu Qingze and lowered his head with a guilty conscience. Chapter 11:22. Chen Ning gave a faint smile and nodded. "That's right, Mr. Gu wants to take me as his inheritor and gave me 3 days to think about it. But I've already thought it over and I'm willing to learn medicine with Mr. Gu, but I have a condition." "What condition?" Gu Qingze was a bit surprised. Since ancient times, it was always the master who gave conditions to the disciple, but today this girl was good. She was actually giving conditions to him. But Gu Qingze was not angry because he was very satisfied with Chen Ning's performance today. This girl's mind was very sharp and she was very strange. When others offended her, she would smile on the surface, but her smile was filled with teeth. If the other party was not careful, she would bite them. Just like that fool who swapped carriages with her. After being sold by her, he happily thought that he had picked up a large bargain. Very good, very good. He, Gu Qingze, would not accept an inheritor. Since he was going to accept someone, he would accept the most outstanding person in the world. This girl's surname Qin was simply too much to his liking. He couldn't help secretly rejoicing. It was a good thing that he found her first. If that person found this kind of good seedling first, it would be a very bad situation. So when he heard Chen Ning agree to take him as her master, she only gave one condition. Even if she gave 8 or 10 conditions, he would still agree without any hesitation. Mr. Gu, my condition is that if you can save King Jing'an, I will take you as my master. If you can't do it, then... Gu Qingze couldn't help interrupting her. As long as he's still alive when I get there, then he definitely won't die. What are you wasting time for? Let's hurry. He was now very impatient, almost rushing to the capital city even faster than Chen Ning. Chen Ning pursed her lips. She wanted to hear this from Gu Qingze. As long as he did his best to save Xiaobai, even if she took him as her master, it would not be a loss. Equipped with shock absorbers, the luxurious carriage ran lightly and steadily. Very quickly, their carriage caught up to the carriage of the young girl in front of them. Zhui Fang's lips curled into a smile and he raised his whip. With a soft shout, the 4 horses' hooves flew out, easily overtaking the carriage and pulling the carriage of the young girl further and further away. Isn't that Master's carriage? That's right. How could it be faster than our carriage? Could it be that our eyes are playing tricks on us? The green-clothed attendants of the luxuriously dressed girl couldn't help but discuss among themselves, muttering as they watched the carriage leave. The coachman's jaw almost dropped as he stared blankly at the carriage ahead. Lai Fu, what are you doing? Lai Fu, what are you doing? How did someone overtake you again? The luxuriously dressed girl suddenly lifted the curtain of the carriage, her face full of anger. When she saw the carriage in front of her, her eyes almost popped out. Wasn't that her own carriage? How? She opened her mouth wide in disbelief, until a cloud of dust flew into her throat as the horse's hooves rose up. Ning Hao! She seemed to realize that she had been tricked, and her face was ashen as she said angrily, catch up to them. If you can't, I'll take your head. Law, master. The coachman gritted his teeth, whipped the horse, and rushed forward without a care for anything else. In this way, although the speed was fast, the people in the carriage were all swaying from side to side, unable to sit still. Chapter 11:23. The maids beside her hurriedly patted her on the back, but they themselves were no better than the well-dressed girl. One of the maids couldn't hold it in and vomited with a wah sound. The carriage was immediately filled with an unpleasant smell. The well-dressed girl was already very disgusted, and when she was stimulated by this smell, she also began to vomit. Chen Ning raised the curtain and looked at the approaching carriage. Her lips curled into a smile. Zhui Feng, slow down a bit. Yes. Zhui Feng replied. The well-dressed girl's carriage once again passed by their carriage. The coachman Lai Fu couldn't help wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. If he hadn't caught up to the carriage, he would have lost his head. The well-dressed girl's eyes revealed a victorious glow. She ignored the waves of discomfort in her chest and opened the curtain. She saw that Chen Ning had also opened the curtain and revealed a faint smile at her, greeting her. Miss, your appearance doesn't look good. Are you feeling unwell? The well-dressed girl's body trembled. This was the first time she had seen Chen Ning's appearance. She saw that her skin was as white as snow, her eyebrows were like a painting, and she had a tranquil smile on her face. The wind blew her hair and it was like a white mountain flower swaying in the wind, looking very beautiful. Suddenly a feeling of jealousy and hatred filled her heart. She had always been proud of her beauty. If she saw a girl that was more beautiful than her, she would not tolerate her. She gave a cold snort with her eyes and began to think in her heart. Miss, do you regret exchanging carriages with me? Chen Ning gave another gentle smile. The well-dressed girl had been shaken like this, and how could she not know that she had been tricked by Chen Ning? She was filled with anger and hatred and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Little slut, you lied to me. Give me back my carriage. She angrily shouted. This is something that Miss willingly exchanged with me. I have written proof here. Miss, your carriage is not bad. I am very satisfied with it. Chen Ning smiled at the well-dressed girl and lowered the curtain. Ah! I'm angered to death. Someone, catch this little slut for me. This miss wants to cut her into 10,000 pieces. The well-dressed girl angrily shouted out. The blue-clothed servants behind her all charged forward. They pulled out their weapons from their waists and slashed at Shui Feng and the carriage. There were even people who took out hidden weapons. There were locust stones, hidden arrows, caltrops, and etc. They were all thrown at the carriage. When they heard the well-dressed girl's words, they knew that their master was truly angry, so they did not care about Chen Ning's group at all. With their master's status, killing a few country bumpkins was like stepping on ants. It was not a big deal at all. The well-dressed girl could not help revealing a smile. Humph, there was no one in this world who wanted to deceive her. That damned girl actually dared to trick her. She wanted them to die without a complete corpse. Shui Feng heard the sound of the hidden weapons behind him and his heart filled with rage. He thought that this unruly girl was truly vicious. She wanted someone's life at the slightest disagreement. It could be seen that this young lady was usually like this. Who knew how many commoners had fallen under this young lady's evil hands? With a loud roar, he jumped out. His attacks were merciless as the horse whip in his hand flew out like a meteor. With a swoosh, it wrapped around the neck of a green-robed attendant. With a light sound, blood burst out and splashed onto the bodies of the people around him. Chapter 11:24. The headless corpse was like a piece of wood as it fell off the horse's back with a pu-tong sound. Ah! When the surrounding people saw this situation, they all let out a cry of fear. The well-dressed girl's face was also splashed with a few drops of something hot. She could smell the smell of blood and reached out to touch it. When she looked at it, her face instantly turned white. Dead country bumpkins, you dare kill my people. You all attack for me, don't leave a single one alive. Her eyes revealed an ominous glow as she spoke these words. She took out several shining throwing knives from her bag and without saying a word, she waved her hand at the carriage Chen Ning was in. The throwing knives let out a sharp sound as they flew towards the carriage. She did not aim at all at this time as she shot out 6 throwing knives, followed by another 6. Shui Feng's figure flashed and he fell down from the sky like an eagle. With a wave of his horse whip, he caught the 12 throwing knives and at the same time, he sent out a palm strike with his left hand, creating a very sharp palm wind. The hidden weapons that the blue-clothed servants had shot at the carriage were all shaken off and they fell to the ground with ding-dang-dang-dang sounds. Such a vicious girl. Shui Feng rarely got angry, but his eyes were filled with rage at this time. With a wave of his horse whip, the 12 throwing knives flew at the well-dressed girl. It was very fast. The well-dressed girl only saw a white light flash in front of her. Her heart knew that this was bad, but it was too late to dodge. In a moment of desperation, she grabbed a shivering servant girl beside her and pushed her towards the place where the white light was flickering. They heard the maid give a pitiful cry as her body was hit by several knives. Her body twisted and she stopped breathing. The rest of the maids were all scared stiff. The well-dressed girl hid into the carriage at this time and loudly shouted, "Save me, there's an assassin." Seeing this, Xiaoru was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She scolded, "This girl is simply not human." Zhui Feng was also stunned. His 12 throwing knives did not really want to take the well-dressed girl's life, he just wanted to injure her a bit and teach her a lesson. But he never thought that the other side would be this vicious, using the maid's body as a shield. In the end, an innocent person's life was lost. His horsewhip lashed out continuously, and every lash of the whip would strike down a green-clothed servant. Each blue-clothed servant that was hit by his whip would have their flesh split open. Although it was not a vital point, it was still painful to the bone. One by one, they fell to the ground and gave a pitiful cry. In the blink of an eye, the several dozen blue-clothed servants beside the well of the well-dressed girl had all fallen to the ground, not a single one of them could stand up. The carriage driver Lai Fu had already rolled out of the carriage in fear. His hands were trembling of his head as he trembled. Wow, Zhui Feng is so strong. Xiao Ru was stunned. Seeing the several dozen servants surrounding them, she was trembling in fear, but she never thought that Zhui Feng would be able to defeat several dozen people by himself. Moreover, it was as easy as breaking through wood, the other side couldn't even take a single hit. The more she looked, the more she of ling of she of water. She of her. She of this of. She became more and she became more excited. Ling of out of. She of her. Of. Zhui Feng's figure flickered as he floated onto the carriage of the young girl. Chapter 11:25. In the carriage, the well-dressed girl and the maids were trembling as they hid in the corner of the carriage. Their eyes were filled with fear as they looked at Zhui Feng standing at the door of the carriage. At this time, the expressionless Zhui Feng was like a death god from hell. If people blocked him, he would kill him. If Buddhas blocked him, he would kill Buddhas. The well-dressed girl's heart filled with a fear she had never felt before. Especially when she saw the blood dripping from Zhui Feng's whip, she felt that she was only a step away from death. She pushed the maids beside her in front of her and hid behind the maids. She said in a trembling voice, Don't kill me. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you." Zhui Feng did not say a word. With a wave of his whip, he threw a maid in front of him out of the carriage. That maid gave a surprised cry. She thought she was dead, but who would have thought that she would only be thrown out of the carriage without any injuries? With a whip, he threw all the maids out. There was only the well-dressed girl left in the carriage. The well-dressed girl's face was pale, her hair was disheveled, and her body was trembling. There was not a trace of her previous arrogant appearance. "As long as you don't kill me, I can give you anything. Wealth, money, and women, you can have anything you want." She closed her eyes and said in a trembling voice, "Who cares about your stinky money?" Zhui Feng gave a pay sound. His eyes were filled with disdain and a thick killing intent. Even at this time, this girl still wanted to use money and power to suppress him. She really did not repent. The well-dressed girl seemed to realize that she could not move Zhui Feng. She suddenly opened her eyes and angrily stared at Zhui Feng. In a sharp voice, she said, "You dare kill me? Do you know who I am?" Zhui Feng did not say a word with a cold face. He slowly raised the whip in his hand. He did not care who this girl was. The person she wanted to kill with a face filled with killing intent was the Empress. "I'm telling you, the current emperor is my cousin and I am the Zhao Rong princess. The entire world belongs to my cousin. If you dare kill me, my cousin the emperor will exterminate your 9 generations and dig up your ancestral graves. If you have the skills, then kill me." She looked up and loudly shouted. The whip that Zhui Feng was about to wave suddenly stopped in the air. His eyes instantly opened wide as he stared at the well-dressed girl in disbelief. "Zhao Rong princess. You really are the Zhao Rong princess?" He knit his brows. He had indeed seen Zhao Rong Junju before, but that was many years ago. He remembered that at that time, she was only a 12-year-old girl. How did she become this cruel and unreasonable girl in front of him? Humph, stinking country bumpkin, are you afraid now? I have never changed my name or my surname. My title, Zhao Rong, was given to me by my cousin, the emperor. If you dare to touch me, it will be a great disrespect. Your family will be destroyed. The well-dressed girl saw the hesitation on Zhui Feng's face and her expression immediately turned arrogant. Zhui Feng hesitated a bit. If the other side was really the Zhao Rong princess, then he could not make a move no matter what. His figure flashed and he had already jumped back into his carriage. He looked at Chen Ning inside the carriage. Chen Feng. Feng, Chen in and Feng in. Chen Ning shook her head and revealed a thoughtful look. She had also heard the threatening words of the well-dressed girl. Hearing her call herself the Zhao Rong princess, Zhui Feng, who was filled with killing intent, retracted his killing intent and retreated. Chapter 11:26. Zhui Feng, let's go. Chen Ning only wanted to teach the well-dressed girl a lesson, she did not have any intentions of killing her. It didn't matter if she was the real Zhao Rong princess or not, she did not want to kill her. Now that she was scared out of her wits, this lesson was enough. Yes. Zhui Feng couldn't help letting out a sigh of relief. He was really worried that the Empress would have him kill the well-dressed girl. If the other side was really Zhao Rong princess and he killed her, how would he explain it to the emperor? He quickly drove the carriage away. The well-dressed girl stared at the carriage that was going further and further away with a venomous gaze. She was so hateful that she almost bled. Little slut, country bumpkin, just you wait for this princess. Even if I go to the heavens or the earth, this princess will find you. If I don't skin you alive, it will be hard to forget the humiliation this princess has suffered today. She swore through gritted teeth and stomped her foot. At this moment, her body suddenly swayed, and the carriage suddenly collapsed like a pile of building blocks, breaking into pieces. It turned out that before Zhui Feng left, he had used a hidden force on the carriage, causing the entire carriage to be shaken loose. The well-dressed girl was caught off guard and fell to the ground on her butt. Her head and face were buried in the broken pieces of wood. Master! Master, are you all right? When her subordinates saw this, they ignored the pain in their bodies and quickly got up, pulling the well-dressed girl out of the pile of dirt. The well-dressed girl's face was covered in dirt. She had never been in this kind of sorry state in her life. Her eyes turned white from anger and she fainted from anger. Ha, ha, this is too fun. Young miss, quickly look, that vicious girl's carriage has turned into a pile of rotten wood. Ha, this is really interesting. Xiao Ru had been looking behind the carriage the entire time. Seeing this scene, she couldn't help clapping her hands and laughing. Chen Ning's eyes looked behind her and her lips slightly curled up. She had a smile on her face as she looked at Zhui Feng's back. Zhui Feng, your martial arts are becoming deeper and deeper. She had already guessed that it was Zhui Feng's doing. Otherwise, with how strong the carriage was, how could it turn into pieces for no reason? Ah, young miss, you're saying that Zhui Feng did this. Xiao Ru's eyes sparkled as she looked at Zhui Feng with a look of worship. The more she looked at Zhui Feng, the more she liked him. His tall and skinny figure, which was like a bamboo pole, no longer looked annoying. Especially after seeing him fight against dozens of people just now, that awe-inspiring appearance, she worshipped him from the bottom of her heart. Young girls worshipped heroes the most. She couldn't help coming out of the carriage and hugging her knees as she sat beside Zhui Feng. She watched Zhui Feng drive the carriage while asking questions in curiosity. Wind, how old are you this year? Why do you always look so serious? Don't you know how to smile? Your kung fu is so good, who taught you? Can you teach me too? Wind, can you accept me as your disciple? Xiaoru suddenly became interested in learning martial arts. She thought that if she could have Zhui Feng's powerful martial arts, she would be able to better protect the young miss. If anyone dared to bully the young miss or provoke the young miss, he could also be like Zhui Feng, beating them until they crawled on the ground like drowning dogs. Just imagining that scene, she felt extremely satisfied. She was like a sparrow as she chattered away. Zhui Feng's head split into two. Chapter 1127. Xiaoru chattered on for a while, but Zhui Feng did not even let out a fart. He did not make a single sound, completely treating her like air. She couldn't help being angry. She puffed out her cheeks and stared at Zhui Feng like a frog. Hey, are you deaf or mute? I'm talking to you. Even if you're a mouse, you should at least make a sound. Her patience had been completely worn away by Zhui Feng, and her originally excited face was now filled with dark clouds. Zhui Feng still ignored her, not even looking at her from the corner of his eyes. If it wasn't for the fact that she was the Empress maidservant, he would have sealed her mute acupuncture point with his finger long ago so that she couldn't speak. How could he have allowed her to keep buzzing in his ears? Xiaoru closed her mouth and did not say a word. Even if she was a piece of wood, even if she was slow, she would still understand what it meant to be unwelcomed. Zhui Feng clearly did not like her at all. She pursed her lips and suddenly wanted to cry. For the first time in her life, she felt this kind of humiliation from being looked down upon. She actually really admired him and really wanted to talk to him. She wanted to be closer to the hero in her heart. She was not born to be hated by others. Lowering her head, a single tear fell from her eye, and with a sound, it fell onto the carriage. Xiaoru turned around and tightly pursed her lips. Without saying a word, she entered the carriage and did not show her face again. Zhui Feng felt his ears suddenly become quiet and the muscles on his back that had been tensed up relaxed. His eyes swept over the carriage and he suddenly saw a small water spot on the carriage. Is it raining? He raised his head to look at the sky, and sure enough, he saw a patch of dark clouds flying over his head. Thus, he urged the horse to speed up the carriage. After a few days, their group finally arrived at the capital city. This journey was surprisingly smooth. When the carriage entered the capital city gates, Chen Ning's heart that was in her throat fell down by a large amount. It was a good thing that the Purple Heaven Pavilion assassins did not appear. She had been worried about this for several days. Because Na Mu Kyo had personally said that the Purple Heaven Pavilion assassins were like maggots in the bone. They would not give up until they reached their goal. She did not know who she had offended, but since the other side had sent people from the Purple Heaven Pavilion to deal with her, they would not let her go easily. Chen Ning was not afraid of the assassins coming, she was just worried that they would delay their journey because of the assassins. Gu Qingzi saw her expression, but he misunderstood. His heart was filled with anger and his face was filled with displeasure. Little girl Chen, do you think this master's title as the world's #1 doctor is just for show? Ever since Chen Ning had agreed to take him as her master, he had always called himself master in front of her. It was as if the matter of her taking him as her master was already set in stone. This showed his confidence in his medical skills, but it also showed that he wanted to take her as his disciple. This meant that he had a lot of confidence in his skills, but it also showed that he wanted to take her. Mr. Gu, why do you say that? Hearing Gu Qingzi's words, Chen Ning was a bit surprised. She looked at him with a frown. Look at how worried you are. Are you worried that the kid is dead? Or are you worried that I won't be able to save him? Gu Qingzi glanced at her coldly. Chen Ning knew that the brat he was talking about was Chu Xiaobai. She couldn't help saying, Zhui Feng, quickly go to Dr. Zhang's palace. Out. Chapter 1128. Really? Chen Ning's eyes flashed with a look of joy. Humph, there's a saying that scourges live for 1,000 years. That brat looks like a monster. Even if he can't live for 1,000 years, living for 100 years isn't a problem. Gu Qingze softly said before looking over at the bustling streets outside the carriage. His eyes were still like an ancient well without any ripples. However, the words that came out of his mouth carried a hint of jealousy. Chen Ning angrily glared at him. Her heart was burning with anxiety, but he was making sarcastic remarks on the side. All right, if he dies, then don't think about me taking you as my master. She also softly said. Gu Qingze immediately turned around to look at her. With me here, he won't die. Chen girl, you can't go back on your promise. Once he heard that she wouldn't take him as her master, he was like a cat that had its tail scalded, not being able to remain calm. Chen Ning's heart was filled with surprise. Why did he like her and wanted to take her as his disciple? Could it be that she had such a good aptitude for medicine? But why didn't she know? They quickly arrived at Dr. Zhang's palace. It was already dusk at this time and the two doors were half closed. Shui Feng didn't have time to call the door as he directly kicked it open. Then he picked up Gu Qingze along with the chair and used his qinggong to run towards the back courtyard. He had already lost his temper after being tossed around by Gu Qingze on the way here. He knew that although this divine doctor's medical skills were high, his temper was very strange. Other than being polite to Chen Ning, she ignored him and Xiao Ru, especially him. She ordered him around as soon as she opened her mouth and was incomparably lazy. If he could lie down, he wouldn't sit. If he could sit, he wouldn't stand. Shui Feng thought about it. Ever since he met this strange divine doctor, he had never seen Gu Qingze's but leave his chair. He clearly knew how to walk and wasn't limping at all. When he arrived at Chu Xiaobai's room, Shui Feng's heart jumped into his throat. Opening the door, he gently placed the chair on the ground and pushed Gu Qingze into the room. Who? Xiao Xi's voice suddenly rang out and he charged out of the room. When he saw Shui Feng, he did not dare believe his eyes. Shui Feng, you're back. Did you invite the divine doctor? Why are you alone? Who is this cripple? Little Four's mouth was like a firecracker, rattling off incessantly. Then, his gaze fell upon Gu Qingze, a look of astonishment on his face. When he said the last sentence, Shui Feng's face turned green and turned as black as the bottom of a pot. He really wanted to stuff this brat's mouth with a sock. Cripple. He dared call him a cripple in front of the divine doctor? He stared at Xiao Xi with eyes that were even colder than ice, causing Xiao Xi to shiver all over. Shui Feng, what? Shui Feng, Xiao Feng said. Of. He turned his head around and said respectfully to Gu Qingze. He felt uneasy in his heart. He was afraid that the divine doctor would fly into a rage and leave with a flick of his sleeve. Chapter 1129. Xiao Xi's mouth fell open and he couldn't close it for a long time. He is godly, Mr. Godly Doctor. He pointed at Gu Qingze in shock and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Move aside. Wind-chasing wolf glared at him again and pushed Gu Qingze inside. Little Four stood there in a daze, a look of confusion on his face. The world-famous #1 godly doctor was actually this young. Not to mention being young, he was actually a cripple. If Shui Feng hadn't personally said this and heard it with his own ears, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. This won't do, he had to quickly tell Dr. Zhang. Xiao Xi immediately ran out. Dr. Zhang had not closed his eyes for several days. He had been reading medical books day and night, trying to find a way to save King Jing'an, but he had tried every method, but none of them had any effect at all. He was mentally and physically exhausted. His half-white hair and beard had turned completely white and his eyes were completely bloodshot. He looked like he had aged another 10 years. But when he heard Xiao Si say that the godly doctor had arrived, Dr. Zhang was filled with excitement. He was so excited that he couldn't say anything as he quickly ran over. Where is the godly doctor? Where is the godly doctor? He looked around the room and only saw Zhui Feng, as well as Chen Ning and Xiao Ru who had just entered. He did not even look at Gu Qingze who was sitting in the chair. This old minister greets the emperor. He prepared to bow, but Chen Ning raised a finger and made a shoo sound. Don't be noisy, the godly doctor is seeing the doctor, she said in a soft voice as she slowly walked over to the bed. Gu Qingze was sitting by the bed, taking Chu Xiaobai's pulse with an expressionless face. Zhui Feng was standing behind Gu Qingze with deep concentration, looking at Chu Xiaobai without blinking. His face was filled with worry. Godly doctor. Dr. Zhang was filled with excitement. His eyes followed Chen Ning's line of sight and his eyebrows couldn't help trembling. This junior that was younger than his own grandson, was the famous #1 godly doctor in the world. Dr. Zhang almost thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He forcefully rubbed his eyes and looked over again. That's right. His jaw was wide open like Xiao Si's and he couldn't close his mouth. Chen Ning's expression was very serious. When she entered, she was choked by the smell of medicine and then she saw Chu Xiaobai lying on the bed without moving. After not seeing him for over 10 days, Chu Xiaobai's situation was even more dangerous than when she left. If it wasn't for the fact that Gu Qingze's hand had been placed on his pulse for a long time, Chen Ning would have thought that the person lying on the bed was a dead person. Her eyes were warm, and tears quickly came out. She closed her eyes and wiped her tears. She looked straight at Gu Qingze, wanting to see if Chu Xiaobai could be saved from his expression. Gu Qingze slightly closed his eyes. After taking Chu Xiaobai's left hand's pulse, he went to take his right hand. The entire room was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him. Suddenly, he frowned and opened his eyes. Mr. Mr. Gu, how is it? Chen Ning asked in a trembling voice. I don't have a pulse anymore, Gu Qingze said expressionlessly. It was like a clap of thunder exploding in the room, shocking everyone in the room. Especially Zhui Feng. He was stunned like a wooden chicken and his face was filled with disbelief. Xiao Ru immediately began to sob and cry. Xiao Si's mouth was wide open as tears poured out of his eyes. Chapter 1130. Impossible. Nonsense. Quack, where did a quack like you come from? You actually dare to pretend to be the divine doctor's name. Dr. Zhang was stunned for a bit before his old face turned red with anger. His white brows stood up and his old eyes filled with blood. He rushed to the bed in a few steps, grabbed Gu Qingze's collar, and said angrily, You quack, you're talking nonsense. Who said he's dead? He's clearly still alive. This old man didn't rest or sleep, spending a lot of effort to save his life, but you actually curse him to die as soon as you open your mouth. What are your intentions? Zhui Feng, Xiao Si, why aren't you quickly chasing this nonsense quack out for this old man? He was so angry that his face changed and his voice began to tremble. Xiao Si and Zhui Feng were both stunned. Dr. Zhang, don't be rude to the divine doctor. Zhui Feng's forehead was covered in sweat from anxiousness. He quickly reached out to save Gu Qingze's clothes from Dr. Zhang's hands. Xiao Si had a look of doubt. He looked at Zhui Feng, Gu Qingze, and then Dr. Zhang. He couldn't tell who was speaking the truth. Zhui Feng, are you sure that the person you brought? This person is the #1 divine doctor in the world. He also trusted Dr. Zhang in his heart. In his impression of the experienced doctors in the doctor yard, which one of them didn't have white hair and large beards? Without a beard, how could they be a doctor? Mr. Divine Doctor's medical skills are clear to all of us. If you don't believe me, you can ask Xiao Ru, she would never lie. Shui Feng said. Dr. Zhang shook his head and still had an angry look on his face. This old man definitely doesn't believe it. King Jing'an is clearly still alive, but this brat actually said he's dead. If he really was the #1 divine doctor in the world, how could he take the wrong pulse? Gu Qingze still had no expression on his face. He didn't even look up at Dr. Zhang as he softly said, I only said he doesn't have a pulse, I didn't say he's dead. Hearing this, the people in the room were stunned again as they looked at him in a daze. What did this mean? Gu Qingze ignored everyone's gazes. He took out a long silver needle and stabbed it into Chu Xiaobai's palm. Chu Xiaobai's 5 fingers did not move at all, not reacting at all. He has already lost his sense of pain, so he's no different from a living dead person. Gu Qingze's words were like a bucket of cold water being poured over everyone's heads. It made the hope that had just been ignited in Qin Ning's heart extinguish once again. She forcefully bit her lips, but she didn't have time to say anything. However, his heart is still warm, and there is still a glimmer of life. This means that someone has been using acupuncture to keep him alive these days. Although the acupuncture is not very good, it is still passable. Gu Qingze still did not look at Dr. Zhang, but his words made Dr. Zhang's old face turn red and green. He glared at Gu Qingze with all his might as he panted heavily. He couldn't understand where this young man had come from. He actually dared to talk about his acupuncture technique in such a careless tone. It should be known that his acupuncture technique was what he was most proud of. But when he looked over, he saw that Qin Ning was looking at this young man with a trusting and dignified gaze. The words that were about to come out of his mouth were swallowed back into his stomach. The Empress wouldn't be fooled by this young man's words and really think of him as a divine doctor, right? Chapter 1131. Mr. Gu, you can save him, can't you? You said before that as long as he's not dead, you can definitely save him. Chen Ning stared at Gu Qingze without blinking. Her dark and clear eyes were filled with tears. Gu Qingze did not deny it and just said with an expressionless face, have them leave. Hearing this, Xiao Si was the first to be unhappy. This cripple sitting in the chair didn't seem older than him by a few years, but the way he spoke was very old and arrogant. He actually dared to use this kind of tone to order the Empress around. Even the Emperor had never used this kind of tone to speak to the Empress. So it was like his feet were rooted to the ground as he stood there without moving. Dr. Zhang did not move either. He blew at his beard, feeling 100 times unconvinced in his heart. Shui Feng acted like he had heard an imperial edict as he immediately walked out the door, dragging Xiao Ru along with him. When Xiao Si saw this, he became even more dissatisfied. Shui Feng, have you forgotten your identity and responsibility? Why do you have to obediently listen to a single sentence from someone else? Do you still remember who your master is? Xiao Si couldn't help mocking him. Shui Feng turned around and glared at Xiao Si. He said in a cold voice, naturally I have to listen to Mr. Godly Doctor's words. Xiao Si, come out as well. Xiao Si stood there without moving and rolled his eyes at Shui Feng. I have master's orders to take care of King Jing'an. Without master's orders, I won't go anywhere. If King Jing'an is harmed by someone, I will be here as a witness to prevent the murderer from escaping. His words were already very impolite, clearly implying that he did not believe Gu Qingze. He was just short of saying the words, Jianghu swindler. Dr. Zhang stroked his beard and nodded at Xiao Si, revealing a look of agreement on his face. He had the Emperor's orders to save King Jing'an. How could he let others randomly use medicine on King Jing'an? When Shui Feng heard this, his expression changed. He kept looking at Xiao Si, telling him not to speak nonsense. Xiao Si turned his head and pretended like he didn't see anything. His heart was filled with disdain towards Shui Feng. He was sure that Shui Feng had been fooled by this fake godly doctor, so he believed his words without a doubt. Even the Empress was the same, they had all been tricked by this cripple. Speaking of this, Xiaoxi and Dr. Zhang couldn't be blamed. The number one godly doctor in the world was just too famous and Gu Qingze was too young. If Qin Ning and Zhui Feng hadn't personally seen his medical skills, they would not have believed that this young man was the legendary number one godly doctor. Qin Ning looked at Xiaoxi and Dr. Zhang. Xiaoxi, Dr. Zhang, you can leave. Let Mr. Godly Doctor stay here and save people. I believe that he will definitely be able to save Xiao Bai. Xiaoxi and Dr. Zhang both opened their eyes wide. The Empress actually had so much confidence in this swindler. This Jianghu swindler must have deceived the Empress with sweet words along the way. Dr. Zhang thought in his heart that the Empress was young and didn't understand medicine, so how could she tell if this was a real or fake godly doctor? However, his eyes could not tolerate a single grain of sand. He could not let this swindler make a move and harm King Jing'en's life. Chapter 1132. With Dr. Zhang saying this, even Chen Ning was too embarrassed to say anything to let him leave. With his identity and status in the Imperial Hospital, he actually condescendingly said that he wanted to be the subordinate of a young man. If the Imperial physicians in the Imperial Hospital heard this, their jaws would all drop. Xiaoxi was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. That's fine, I just happen to need manpower. If this old man is willing to help, then he can stay. Gu Qingze softly said. Old man. Dr. Zhang's ears shook, thinking that he had heard wrong. This brat really was shameless. Dr. Zhang gave an angry laugh and said with a cold laugh, then I'll have to thank Mr. Godly Doctor. I ask Mr. Godly Doctor to show off your skills and quickly save the patient, allowing this old man's eyes to be opened. Gu Qingze seemed like he did not hear the sarcasm in his words at all as he nodded. All right, I'll give you a prescription first. We'll talk about it after saving his life. Hearing this, Dr. Zhang and Xiaoxi both sucked in a cold breath as their eyes popped out. Save his life. This godly doctor really had a big tone when he said this. Mr. Godly Doctor, right now King Jing'en won't be able to drink water or rice. He won't be able to take any medicine. So, you should think of other methods and not let the patient suffer any longer. Dr. Zhang couldn't help saying this. He had treated Chu Xiaobai for over half a month, not sleeping at all and flipping through all the medical books, but Chu Xiaobai's condition was becoming worse and worse. Now his limbs were turning cold and he had lost all awareness of the outside world. There was only his heartbeat and almost undetectable breathing. If it wasn't for the Emperor pouring his internal energy into his body every day, stimulating his meridians to slowly move, perhaps King Jing'en wouldn't have been able to last until now. Gu Qingze acted like he did not hear his words at all. He turned his chair and walked to the table to the side. He wrote a prescription and handed it over to Dr. Zhang. Boil the medicine according to the prescription and immediately send it over. Dr. Zhang took the prescription and took a look at it. His hands suddenly trembled and he almost threw the prescription to the ground. Aconitum, 100 grams. He said in a trembling voice. He could hardly believe his eyes. It had to be known that although Fu was a Chinese medicine, it was highly toxic and one couldn't use more than 10 grams. However, this prescription had 10 times the amount. How could he not be shocked? How was this a cure? It was clearly a poison to kill. Your Highness, this prescription cannot be used. Dr. Zhang straightened his chest and loudly said to Qin Ning, this godly doctor's first medicine is aconite. This aconite is also known as aconite and is also known as the 5 poisons. It is indeed a good medicine, but it also contains a very strong poison. The medical books clearly say that it can't exceed 10 grams, but this godly doctor has given 100 grams. With such a large amount of aconite, even a normal person wouldn't be able to take it. Not to mention that King Jing Yuan is extremely weak right now. With this medicine, this old minister is worried. He did not finish, but Chen Ning naturally understood what he meant. Although she didn't understand medicine, she had a head full of medical books and prescriptions, so she knew that Dr. Zhang's words weren't nonsense. It was indeed written in the medical books that aconite was extremely toxic and should not be used in excess. But, so what? She believed that Gu Qingze would definitely not write out this prescription for no reason. Chapter 1133. Dr. Zhang, boil the medicine according to Mr. Gu's prescription. Chen Ning returned the prescription to Dr. Zhang. Dr. Zhang's old face turned red and he angrily said, "Empress, you don't understand medicine and don't know how strong this aconite is. If this medicine is given, what happens to His Highness King Jing'an?" Chen Ning cut him off and firmly said, "No matter what happens, I will take responsibility for it." Dr. Zhang's mouth fell open as he looked at Chen Ning, unable to say a single word. He turned his head and glared at Gu Qingze, thinking that this swindler was too hateful. He didn't know what kind of soup he had fed the Empress to make the Empress trust him like this. He didn't think that a real divine doctor would come and instead invited a swindler. No, he couldn't let King Jing'an fall into the hands of this swindler no matter what. Dr. Zhang made up his mind and looked at Xiaoxi with his eyes. "Xiaoxi, come with me to boil the medicine." He brought Xiaoxi out of the room and said in a low voice, "Quickly invite the emperor over. I'll stall for time here, we can't let this swindler succeed." Xiaoxi looked back with a nervous expression and also said in a low voice, "Dr. Zhang, are you sure that cripple is a swindler?" Dr. Zhang confidently nodded, "This old man is sure." He pointed at the prescription in his hand and said, "This medicine is very poisonous. If King Jing'an takes it, this old man is sure that he won't be able to last a while. However, the Empress has been tricked by this swindler and she would rather believe this swindler than this old man, so we must immediately invite the emperor over. Go, go." Hearing that the swindler's medicine was poisonous, Xiaoxi's body gave a cold shiver. He did not dare delay any longer and quickly ran off to report to the royal palace. Dr. Zhang slowly walked into the medicine room. While filling up the medicine, he was thinking about the prescription. The more he looked, the more certain he was that his judgment wasn't wrong. There were several medicines on this prescription that were completely different from what was written in the books, so they definitely couldn't be mixed together. Humph, this swindler really had ulterior motives, wanting to harm King Jing'an's life. He deliberately stalled for time. It wasn't until Zhui Feng came 3 times that he brought out the medicine and slowly walked into the room. He kept looking around on the way as his heart filled with anxiety. Didn't that brat Xiaoxi go to the palace to report? Why isn't he back after so long? His neck was sore from looking, but he still didn't see the emperor and Xiaoxi's figures. At this time, Zhui Feng came out of the room and took the bowl of medicine in his hand. He said in a complaining voice, "The godly doctor has been waiting anxiously. If we delay the godly doctor from saving people, I want to see how you will explain it to the emperor." Dr. Zhang couldn't help glaring, "Zhui Feng, you also believe that Brad is a divine doctor. He can save King Jing'an. Do you know what will happen to you if you drink this medicine? If something were to happen to King Jing'an, would you be able to take responsibility?" Zhui Feng's step stopped and he said without turning his head, "I believe in Mr. Godly Doctor's skills." Dr. Zhang looked at Zhui Feng's back and angrily stomped his feet. He followed Zhui Feng into the room. "Your Highness, this old minister will say one last thing. There is a strong poison in this medicine, so I ask you to reconsider if you want to give it to King Jing'an." At this time, Gu Qingze had already placed the bowl of medicine beside Chu Xiaobai and was prepared to feed it to him. Chapter 1134. "Chen girl, this old man isn't wrong. There is a strong poison in this medicine. I'll only ask you one question, do you believe me or him?" Gu Qingze said in a cold voice. Chen Ning did not hesitate at all as she said, "I believe you." "All right. A hint of a smile flashed past Gu Qing's clear and cold eyes, but it disappeared in a flash, so fast that no one saw it. Dr. Zhang was angry and annoyed. He turned to look out the door, thinking that only the emperor could stop this swindler. But for some unknown reason, Mo Chuan did not appear and even Xiao Si did not come back. Bag. Gu Qingzi said without turning his head. He did not say any names, but Shui Feng immediately jumped up and moved like the wind. In just a few blinks of an eye, he appeared in front of everyone with the large bag Gu Qingzi had brought from the Miracle Doctor Valley. Tube. Gu Qingzi said again. Shui Feng immediately opened the bag and took out a long soft tube from a small bag. It was unknown what material it was made of, but it was even thinner than a person's pinky finger. Dr. Zhang looked at it without blinking, not knowing what this thing was used for. Gu Qingzi picked up the long tube and used a silver knife to pry open Chu Xiaobai's teeth. Then he slowly placed the long tube into his mouth and down his throat. After a while, he took out a funnel and slowly poured the cold medicine into the long tube. It flowed down Chu Xiaobai's throat. Seeing this, Dr. Zhang's old eyes couldn't help opening wide. He slapped his forehead in regret and thought, I really am stupid. Why didn't I think of using this method to feed him medicine? Because Chu Xiaobai had lost all of his senses and did not know how to swallow at all, not to mention feeding him medicine. The so-called housewife can't cook without rice. No matter how skilled Dr. Zhang's medical skills were, if the patient didn't drink the medicine, there was nothing he could do. Seeing Gu Qingzi slowly feed a bowl of medicine with a large amount of aconite, not leaving a single drop, Dr. Zhang suddenly shivered. This is bad. This medicine was personally brewed by him. If something happened to King Jing and after he drank it, the first person the emperor would cut off would be his head. His forehead was covered in a cold sweat as he stared at Chu Xiaobai without blinking and his legs began to tremble. In his expectations, Chu Xiaobai would be poisoned to death before long. But after a while, Chu Xiaobai on the bed did not move at all and did not react at all. Gu Qingzi couldn't help knitting his brows. He placed his hand on Chu Xiaobai's pulse and carefully felt it again. Old man, decoct another dose of the medicine according to the recipe just now. Double the amount of the medicine. If you dare to mess with the decoction again and cause an accident to the patient, I will hold you accountable. Gu Qingzi suddenly turned around and a pair of cold eyes looked right at Dr. Zhang. Dr. Zhang suddenly trembled. He thought that this young man was really strong, he even noticed that he had secretly cut the medicine by half. Dr. Zhang, please make the medicine according to Mr. Gu's prescription and please believe in Mr. Gu. With him here, Xiaobai will definitely be safe. You can be assured that no matter what happens, I will take responsibility for it. Chen Ning's eyes fell onto Dr. Zhang's face, seeing his nervousness, fear, and worry. She knew what Dr. Zhang was worried about and what Dr. Zhang thought of Gu Qingzi. Chapter 1135. Dr. Zhang nodded and turned to leave. After a while, he came back with a bowl of medicine that had just been brewed. Although he had reduced the dosage by half, there was still a large amount of aconite. After Chu Xiaobai took it, although he did not get any better, the good thing was that it did not get worse. This filled Dr. Zhang's heart with a trace of hope. Perhaps this strange medicine could really save His Highness King Jing'an's life. Your Highness, the amount of aconite in this bowl has doubled, what do you think? Dr. Zhang first asked for Chen Ning's opinion. Chen Ning took it without any hesitation. She walked in front of the bed and blew on it. Then she copied Gu Qingzi's method and slowly poured it into the funnel. Gu Qingzi looked at her, little girl Chen, do you believe me this much? Does the old man and the little monkey think I'm a swindler? His voice was filled with a hint of self-mockery. Dr. Zhang's old face couldn't help turning red. He knew that the old man was talking about him and the little monkey was talking about Xiao Si. Chen Ning said word for word, Master, I believe you can save Xiao Bai. As soon as the word master entered his ears, Gu Qingze felt every pore on his body become comfortable. His originally ice-cold hostility instantly disappeared without a trace. Alright, since you called me master, I'll show off my skills and let that old man see if I'm the real deal or if I'm not worthy of my reputation. Gu Qingze nodded at Dr. Zhang. Old man, come here. Dr. Zhang looked at Chu Xiaobai in fear. He was thinking, this King Jing'an had just taken 150 grams of aconite. With such a heavy poison, how could he withstand it? Wouldn't he bleed from his 7 orifices and die? He heard Gu Qingze call him and he absent-mindedly walked forward. Try the pulse on his left hand. Gu Qingze said. Dr. Zhang slightly reached out his right hand to take his pulse. After a while, his white beard moved and his brows rose up, revealing a shocked expression. There's a pulse. He shouted in a surprised and happy voice. Although Chu Xiaobai's pulse was very weak, so weak that he couldn't feel it, he had still felt it. Hearing this, Chen Ning and Zhui Feng revealed expressions of relief. Although Dr. Zhang was pleasantly surprised, he still couldn't understand why such a heavy amount of aconite was given to a weak patient. Not only did the patient not die, it even turned around. What kind of reasoning was this? He opened his mouth, wanting to ask Gu Qingze for guidance. But thinking about how he had mocked the other party and how he didn't put the other party in his eyes, he was filled with shame and he couldn't say the words that came to his mouth. Chen girl, do you know why the aconite in my prescription is so heavy and the poison is so strong, but after he ate it, he didn't die and instead immediately got better? Gu Qingze did not look at Dr. Zhang at all, rather he looked at Chen Ning with a questioning gaze. Chen Ning thought for a bit and replied, Chen, there is. I, there. I, there. Chen, there. Chapter 1136. Without strong medicine, how can a serious illness be cured? He suddenly remembered that his respected master had once taught him that he couldn't rely on books when practicing medicine. He had to bravely prescribe medicine and when necessary, he had to use strong medicine. He suddenly remembered that his teacher had also earnestly taught him that when practicing medicine, one should not be too rigidly bound by books. One should boldly prescribe medicine, and when it was necessary, one should use strong medicine. This was the first time he had thought of these words after several decades. He remembered that when he first left his master's tutelage, he also wanted to firmly remember his master's teachings. But as he grew older and his medical skills became more profound, he rarely remembered his master's teachings. He rarely prescribed strong or dangerous medicines. Later on, when he entered the imperial hospital, he did not seek to be meritorious, but only to not make mistakes. The prescriptions he prescribed were all extremely gentle and nourishing, and he had long forgotten his master's words. Hearing Chen Ning's words at this time, he once again remembered his master's words. Thinking of all the prescriptions he had written over the past few decades, he couldn't help sweating profusely and feeling extremely ashamed. But he quickly raised his old eyes and looked at Gu Qingze with a shocked gaze. However, he quickly raised his old eyes and looked at Gu Qingze with an extremely shocked gaze. Gu Qingze was currently performing acupuncture on Chu Xiaobai. His acupuncture technique was very fast, but each needle was very clear, not having the slightest mistake in identifying the acupuncture points. He used many different methods to place the needles, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, sometimes yin and sometimes yang. His 10 fingers danced in the air and Dr. Zhang was stunned seeing this. Dr. Zhang was most proud of his acupuncture techniques, but at this time, he found that the acupuncture techniques he knew, compared to this junior in front of him, couldn't even be compared to carrying someone else's shoes. Gu Qingze changed 7-8 acupuncture techniques in a row and Dr. Zhang found that he could only recognize 2-3 of them. As for the other acupuncture techniques, it was his first time seeing them and he couldn't take his eyes off them. His heart was beating fast in his chest and his hands were trembling. His expression was becoming more and more excited. Gu Qingze looked at Gu Qingze and said, "Divine Doctor's wonderful hands. Divine Doctor's wonderful hands." His mind was filled with these 4 words. The people present all stared at Gu Qingze applying the needles on Chu Xiaobai, but there was no one more shocked than Dr. Zhang. This was because he was personally witnessing a peerless doctor displaying his divine acupuncture techniques. He was filled with excitement and didn't dare to blink, afraid that he would miss something if he blinked. At this time, how could he still doubt that the young man in front of him was a swindler? He was the world's #1 divine doctor. Other than him, where else in this world would have this kind of divine skill? Dr. Zhang's eyes filled with excitement as tears came out. Being able to personally witness the divine doctor's acupuncture techniques, he had no regrets in this life. At this time, there was a burst of noise coming from the courtyard outside. "Quick, go in and capture that divine doctor swindler. The Empress Dowager has ordered us to quickly capture the divine doctor swindler." Gu Qingze was completely focused on performing acupuncture, not paying attention to the outside world at all. Dr. Zhang was completely focused on watching, not even blinking. He didn't hear the sounds coming from outside at all. Chen Ning slightly knit her brows and looked at Zhui Feng on the side. "Zhui Feng, no matter what happens, you can't let anyone come in and disturb my master's rescue." She knew that this was a critical moment and she couldn't be disturbed at all. Chapter 1137. "Xiao Si, what are you doing?" Zhui Feng shouted with an unkind expression. "Zhui Feng, I'm under the Empress Dowager's orders to catch that swindler divine doctor, to prevent King Jing'an from being killed by him. You've all been tricked by him." Xiao Si raised his head and puffed out his chest, speaking in a righteous manner. "What swindler divine doctor? You can't be rude to Mr. Divine Doctor. The Divine Doctor is currently saving someone, so if you dare disturb Mr. Divine Doctor and the Emperor finds out, you'll be the first to not be let off. Does the Emperor know that you've brought people here?" Zhui Feng blocked the door and coldly looked over the surrounding guards. Then he looked away and looked at Xiao Si's face. Xiao Si shook his head and said, "The Emperor has an important matter to attend to, so he doesn't have time to see me. I've reported this matter to the Empress Dowager and the Empress Dowager has immediately sent down an edict for me to capture someone." "Zhui Feng, move aside. Could it be you want to defy the edict?" Zhui Feng blocked the door and did not move. "Zhui Feng, Dr. Zhang said that cripple is a swindler, don't fall for his trick." Xiao Si said again. "Mr. Divine Doctor is not a swindler. If you don't believe me, you can personally take a look. After he fed King Jing'an 2 doses of medicine, King Jing'an already has a pulse. He is currently performing acupuncture for His Highness, so none of you are allowed to disturb the Divine Doctor. This is the Empress orders." "Xiao Si, you only listen to the Empress Dowager's orders, but do you not listen to the Empress orders?" "What? King Jing'an has a pulse." Xiao Si's eyes opened wide as he revealed a look of disbelief. Behind Xiao Si was a large group of doctors from the doctor yard. They were all under Empress Dowager Zhou's orders to check Chu Xiaobai's illness. Hearing this, they were all like Xiao Si, their mouths wide open. In this period of time, their hair had all turned white because of Chu Xiaobai's illness, but no one could do anything. Everyone knew that King Jing'an wouldn't be able to make it. He was relying on the qi in his body to keep himself alive. If there was no one to give him qi one day, he would quickly die. Hearing that King Jing'an had a pulse at this time, the doctors could not believe their ears. At this time, Dr. Zhang's shocked voice suddenly came from the room. His eyes were filled with shock. He's breathing. King Jing'an, he's breathing. The voice was filled with surprise and joy, as well as disbelief. The doctors outside the room were filled with excitement as they impatiently rushed into the room. In their eyes, the living dead not only had a pulse, but they were also breathing. This was equivalent to a miracle in the history of medicine. The one treating King Jing'an was definitely the #1 divine doctor in the world. This was a once-in-100 years chance to learn and observe, so they had to personally witness it. But the doctors were all blocked by Zhui Feng outside the door. The Empress ordered that no one is allowed to go in and disturb the miracle-working doctor. If anyone disobeys, I won't be polite. Win said coldly. The doctors heard this and they all moved back. They all revealing looks of Qing Feng. It was still Dr. Zhang who had the good fortune, being able to see the divine doctor save someone in the room. Why didn't he have such good luck? With I, they, he, Qing, and Qing, Feng, Qing, he, Qing, Feng, he, Qing, Feng, Ling. With a single glance, he immediately became motionless like a clay statue or a wooden statue. Chapter 1138. When the royal guards saw this, they all looked at Xiaoxi. Brother Xiaoxi, the Empress Dowager wants us to catch the divine doctor, but this divine doctor doesn't seem like a swindler. Do we still follow the Empress Dowager's orders? Someone asked. Xiaoxi scratched his head. He was also confused. Dr. Zhang personally told him that the divine doctor was a swindler, so how did the swindler become the divine doctor now? You guys wait here, I'll go in to take a look. Xiaoxi walked in front of Zhui Feng and saw the other side blocking the door with a calm face, not even looking at him. He said with a smile, Zhui Feng, let me go in and see if the divine doctor is a swindler or not. Zhui Feng gave a snort and said, Mr. Divine Doctor was personally invited by the Empress. Do you think the Empress would invite a swindler to save King Jing'an? You've been rude and disrespectful to the Divine Doctor, offending him. If he leaves in anger, can you take responsibility for the consequences? Xiaoxi was startled and looked behind Zhui Feng. He saw Dr. Zhang changing his arrogant attitude and respectfully standing by Guqing's side. His respectful expression was like a disciple facing a strict master, not daring to even take a deep breath. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, Xiaoxi would never have believed that this was real. At this step, how could he still suspect that Guqing's was a swindler? Big brother Zhui Feng, it's all Xiaoxi's fault. My heart was covered and I actually misunderstood the divine doctor. I'll go in and apologize to the divine doctor. He said with a face filled with fear. No need. The divine doctor is a magnanimous person and won't bother with a little monkey like you. Just obediently wait outside and don't disturb the divine doctor saving people. Zhui Feng said in a cold voice before suddenly asking, why did the Empress Dowager send someone? Where is the emperor? Xiaoxi swallowed a mouthful of saliva and rubbed his nose. He said in a low voice, a large matter has happened in the palace and the emperor is busy dealing with it. I didn't dare disturb the emperor, so I went to report to the Empress Dowager. What large matter has happened? Zhui Feng's expression couldn't help tensing up. Xiaoxi was about to open his mouth, but he looked around and closed his mouth. Zhui Feng immediately understood his meaning. There were too many people. It seemed like this matter was not only a large matter, it was also a secret matter. He immediately felt his heart clench, wishing that he could immediately rush back to the palace and help the emperor. But when he turned back to look at the situation in the room, he stopped in his tracks. Gu Qingze had already placed acupuncture on over 700 acupuncture points on Chu Xiaobai's body, including the 50 extra acupuncture points. Half of this acupuncture technique was learned from the Ghost Gate 13 needles that Chen Ning gave him. Even he had tried this acupuncture technique for the first time, so how could Dr. Zhang not have seen it before? His eyes were dazzled and his heart was filled with shock. After the acupuncture, not only did Chu Xiaobai recover his breathing, his eyelids were also slightly moving, showing signs of waking up. Seeing this scene, Dr. Zhang's eyes almost popped out and the jaws of the doctors outside the window all fell down. Everyone's eyes were glued to the scene. Chapter 1139. Why is it like this? Shui Feng couldn't help letting out a soft cry. This turn of events caused everyone's hearts to leap to their throats. Dr. Zhang looked at Gu Qingze and moved his lips. He wanted to ask something, but he felt it was too sudden, so he could only look at Chen Ning. Master, Xiaobai, what happened to him? Chen Ning looked at Chu Xiaobai without blinking as tears filled her eyes. She had just seen the hope of recovery from Chu Xiaobai's body, but who would have thought that his illness would suddenly take a turn for the worse? Gu Qingze took his hand back from Chu Xiaobai's wrist, but his expression was still as calm as before. He's so young, what is it that he can't accept? He gently shook his head as his eyes revealed a puzzled look. Master, what do you mean by this? Chen Ning wiped away her tears and looked up at Gu Qingze. Gu Qingze shook his head again. He has already regained consciousness, but his consciousness is resisting waking up. He has this kind of change because he doesn't want to live at all. In other words, he is seeking death. When the people inside and outside the room heard his words, their expressions all changed. Dr. Zhang couldn't help nodding. Gu Qingze's words were exactly the same as his previous judgment. No matter how skilled a doctor was, it was hard to save a person that wanted to die. Chu Xiaobai's case was the most headache for doctors and the most difficult patient to treat. Master, you can save him, right? Chen Ning forcefully bit her lower lip and her face turned pale. She knew better than anyone why Chu Xiaobai's heart was like dead ashes and he wanted to die. No matter who it was, after being betrayed and used by the person they trusted the most, they would be as disheartened as him, not to mention that there was still such a deep pain in his heart. He indeed didn't want to wake up, he wasn't willing to wake up and face all of this. He just wanted to hide in an unconscious world, or perhaps he wanted to leave this world forever. But no matter what, she couldn't let Xiaobai die like this. Of course. Gu Qingze's two soft words lit up Chen Ning's eyes once again. With me, Gu Qingze here, even if he wants to die, would it be that easy? Gu Qingze raised his pen and wrote a prescription, giving it to Dr. Zhang. Boil the medicine according to the prescription, the faster the better. Dr. Zhang was so excited that his hands began to tremble. He held the prescription like it was a treasure that fell from the sky. He looked it over several times, remembering the amount and usage of each medicine in his heart. Although there were still 2 herbs in the prescription that he thought were impossible to take, he meticulously decocted the herbs according to the prescription and then brought it in. Master, Xiaobai's body is burning hot, which should be a sign of a high fever. However, I saw that the medicine you gave him did not reduce his fever and instead used a large amount of heat medicine. Why is that? Although Chen Ning did not understand medicine, she knew the effects of each medicine. Her question was also the same question that Dr. Zhang and the other doctors had in their hearts. If they were to prescribe this medicine, they would definitely prescribe cooling medicine to reduce the fever. They would definitely not do the opposite. Wasn't using a large amount of hot medicine for a fever the same as adding oil to the fire? But no one dared to doubt Gu Qingze's medical skills at all, they were just puzzled. Hearing Chen Ning's question, they all perked up their ears. Chapter 1140. What? Other than Chen Ning, everyone here took in a cold breath as they looked at Gu Qingze with a look of disbelief. The bowl in Dr. Zhang's hand almost fell to the ground. Chen Ning couldn't help rolling her eyes at Gu Qingze. Can't you speak properly? Gu Qingze said unhurriedly, it's common knowledge in medicine to use cooling medicine to reduce a fever. But now, he suddenly has a fever, and it's not because the evil fire in his body has risen, but because he subconsciously doesn't want to live anymore. If he uses cooling medicine to reduce his fever at this time, it's the same as pouring water on a red-hot soldering iron, and he'll soon die. I'm using a large amount of hot medicine right now. It can force out all the heat in his body. It won't take long for his fever to reduce. So it's like this. The doctors all revealed looks of understanding. Dr. Zhang was even more relieved as he quickly placed the bowl of medicine in front of Gu Qingze. Gu Qingze did not take it and nodded at Qin Ning with his chin. If there's anything, a disciple will do it. You want to take me as your master, is that just something you said? It was clearly you who asked me to take you as my master, all right? Qin Ning couldn't help silently criticizing him. But she still took the bowl of medicine. All right, I'll feed him the medicine. Chu Xiaobai had already recovered his breathing and his pulse had become much stronger. He was no longer a living dead person that had no feelings at all. So there was no need to use a tube to feed him the medicine. She scooped up a small spoonful of medicine and slowly fed it into his mouth. Chu Xiaobai's throat moved and he slowly swallowed the medicine. The doctors were surprised and happy. Almost everyone was looking at Qin Ning with eyes filled with envy. The godly doctor actually said he wanted to take her as his disciple. This was an honor they could never have dreamed of. If the godly doctor was willing to take her as his disciple, even if she wasn't his disciple, just giving her a few pointers would be enough for her medical skills to greatly increase, giving her endless benefits. Dr. Zhang's eyes were filled with passion. The mysterious acupuncture technique that Gu Qingze had displayed in front of him had completely convinced him. In his eyes, Gu Qingze was no different from a god. He suddenly knelt in front of Gu Qingze with a thud, giving everyone a big fright. Godly Dr. Gu, this old man also wishes to take the godly doctor as his master. With him recommending himself, the jaws of the doctors all fell down. They looked at him with envy and jealousy, wishing they could be the one kneeling in front of the godly doctor. In the room, Zhui Feng, Xiao Ru, and Xiao Si all felt this was funny. Dr. Zhang had white hair and Gu Qingze was only in his early 20s. In terms of age, Dr. Zhang was more than old enough to be Gu Qingze's grandfather, but now he was kneeling in front of Gu Qingze with a sincere expression, saying he wanted to take him as his master. But Qin Ning and the other doctors were filled with respect for Dr. Zhang. With Dr. Zhang's status and medical skills, he didn't need to be this respectful to a young man. He actually didn't care about his age and status, bowing his head to Gu Qingze as his master. This showed how firm his heart was in learning medicine. This kind of attitude of living and learning made all the other doctors blush with shame. They recalled that ever since they entered the Imperial Academy of Medicine, they rarely went to read medical books and rarely tried to improve their medical skills. Everyone thought that their medical skills had already reached the peak. If they didn't advance, they would fall back. Ever since they started working in the doctor yard, they had only treated the royal family members, so they rarely came in contact with hard-to-treat illnesses. Usually when they were sick, they could easily cure them. This made them even more arrogant. Chapter 1141. Old man, I won't take you as my disciple. Gu Qingze sat in the chair and softly looked at Dr. Zhang. His face was still calm. You have a big beard and you're already this old. If you say you're my disciple, wouldn't others laugh at me? Dr. Zhang's face was filled with disappointment as he awkwardly scratched his head of white hair. With a self-mocking smile, he said, "That's right, this old man is already old and doesn't have many years left to live. Wanting to study medicine under the divine doctor's tutelage is truly wishful thinking." He trembled as he stood up. However, Gu Qingze's tone changed as he looked at him. If this old man feels that I'm not a swindler and wants to compare pointers with me, I'm free. Really? Dr. Zhang was instantly filled with joy as his wrinkled face turned into a chrysanthemum. He knew that Gu Qingze said it was a competition, but he had already agreed to teach him medicine, so his heart was filled with gratitude. Gu Qingze ignored him. After Chen Ning finished feeding him the medicine, he took Chu Xiaobai's pulse and then gave a slight nod. Chen Ning wiped Chu Xiaobai's forehead and found that after taking the medicine, his body was covered in sweat and his temperature was much higher than before. However, not long after, he began to sweat less and his body temperature slowly fell. His breathing became calmer and calmer, making his heart incomparably happy. Gu Qingze looked at her. "Girl, you don't need to be happy so quickly. As the saying goes, if the king of hell wants you to die at midnight, who dares to stay until midnight? Do you think he has been saved just like this? Do you think he would willingly come back to life?" Chen Ning's heart suddenly sank. She looked up and asked, "What do you mean by this? If we don't remove the will to die in his heart, his illness will continue to recur. Girl, do you know why he is seeking his own death at such a young age? He is King Jing'an, he is young and his appearance. It was okay in the past, but now he is ugly. He can get whatever he wants, so why can't he accept it?" Gu Qingze shook his head, looking like he couldn't understand. Chen Ning bit her lips, hesitating to speak. "This is bad, divine Dr. Gu, quickly look. King Jing'an, he's trembling." Dr. Zhang pointed at Chu Xiaobai and shouted. Gu Qingze and Chen Ning turned around and found that Chu Xiaobai's teeth were tightly clenched and his face was blue. His lips were white without a trace of blood and he was shivering. "Hee, as expected. Since you want to die, I won't let you die. If you don't believe me, let's give it a try. Let's see who wins." Gu Qingze stood up from his chair and walked in front of Chu Xiaobai's bed. Seeing this, everyone was stunned. This. Wasn't this genius doctor a cripple? How could he walk? Xiao Si was even more stunned. He turned to look at Zhui Feng with a questioning look on his face. "Zhui Feng, he is not lame." Before he finished, he was interrupted by Zhui Feng's cold gaze. "Little four, if you dare speak nonsense again, I'll beat you into a cripple." Zhui Feng snapped. Little four hurriedly covered his mouth. After Gu Qingze took her pulse, he wrote another prescription without saying anything else. Not long after taking this medicine, Chu Xiaobai no longer shivered, but other problems quickly appeared. Gu Qingze had a cold expression as he continued to write different prescriptions. Chapter 1142. Ever since Chen Ning knew him, she had rarely seen him this angry. But Gu Qingze's expression was very ugly right now. It could be described as flustered and exasperated. He wasn't angry that he couldn't cure Chu Xiaobai's illness, but rather he was angry that a good person like him was seeking death. Alright, then he would compete with this fellow. He wanted to see if his medical skills were better or if this fellow was more determined to die. I, Gu Qingze, finally found a good seedling and wanted to take her as my successor, but you brat just had to give me eye medicine. You don't believe that I can't cure you, right? Let's see if I, Gu Qingze, will King Yama dare to take you into his palace if I don't agree. Gu Qingze wrote a prescription while explaining to Chen Ning why he had to use the medicine like this, as well as some of the key tricks to curing the illness. Chen Ning remembered every word he said. She knew that although she didn't understand it now, this was a very valuable clinical experience. When the doctors on the side heard Gu Qingze's words, they felt like they had gained a lot. They all had excited expressions as they stood outside the room with pen and paper. Whatever Gu Qingze said, they would write it down. Moreover, they had personally witnessed how Gu Qingze had saved Chu Xiaobai from the gates of hell again and again in this dangerous situation. Each of his prescriptions had opened everyone's eyes. He really was worthy of being the #1 divine doctor in the world. The doctors all admired Gu Qingze from the bottom of their hearts. Encountering these complicated conditions, they couldn't even handle a single one of them, but no matter what problem Gu Qingze encountered, he could always quickly think of a way to cure them. The difference between a great doctor and a famous doctor was just this. Unknowingly, time flew by. From dusk to late night, from late night to dawn. Gu Qingze had already been busy for an entire night. The doctors had also been waiting for an entire night. They stood in front of the window, feeling so sleepy that they couldn't move their eyelids. Dr. Zhang was already old, and adding in the fact that he hadn't slept for several days, he couldn't hold on any longer. He leaned against the chair and fell into a deep sleep. Chen Ning stayed by Chu Xiaobai's side the entire time. It had been almost 4 hours since he took the medicine, and he had been sleeping very peacefully in these 4 hours. There were no other sudden problems and his condition was very stable. Little girl Chen, you've been tired for an entire night, so go sleep. I'll just watch over this brat. According to your master's estimation, this brat shouldn't cause any more trouble. Gu Qingze's lips curled up and a faint smile appeared on his face. This was a proud and victorious smile. I'm not tired, the one who's really tired is you. I'll stay here to watch over Xiaobai. Master, you should go rest. Chen Ning sincerely looked at Gu Qingze, her heart filled with gratitude. She had seen how hard it had been for him this day and night. It was him who used all his effort to save Chu Xiaobai, allowing Chu Xiaobai to be safe. It was him who created an impossible miracle. Eldest Miss, Mr. Godly Doctor, this servant has cooked some porridge, would you like to have some to fill your stomach? Xiao Ru quietly came in with a tray in her hand. There were 2 bowls of green rice porridge on it, releasing a fragrant smell. Xiao Ru, thank you, you're really careful. I'm also hungry. Master, why don't you eat a bowl? Chen Ning smiled at Xiao Ru and placed a bowl of porridge in front of Gu Qingze. Chapter 1143. Chen Ning nodded. She was indeed very tired, and adding in the fact that Chu Xiaobai's condition was very stable, it made the large stone in her heart fall down. After she finished eating the porridge, she leaned back in the chair and used her arm to support her head. She wanted to close her eyes to rest, but she soon fell asleep. Just as she was half asleep, a pair of strong arms suddenly hugged her, and a familiar cool aura with a faint smell of morning dew surrounded her. It was like she had returned to a familiar and firm embrace. Mo Chuan. She softly said. In her dream, she saw Mo Chuan again. That pair of eyes that were as black as ink were looking at her with a deep and focused gaze. She couldn't help falling into the whirlpool of his eyes, sinking into it and not wanting to wake up again. She leaned into the familiar embrace. Not only did she not open her eyes, but she also felt particularly at ease and slept even more soundly. A warm and soft thing was pressed against her forehead and a familiar aura slowly drifted over. She couldn't help giving a soft sigh. Her lips slightly curled up and she revealed a sweet smile. In her dream, Mo Chuan was gently kissing her forehead. His lips were just like before, warm and soft. Who are you? Let go of her. Suddenly, a discordant voice rang out. Following that, someone grabbed her right arm and forcefully pulled. But the man who held her tightened his hold on her. Who are you? Let go of her. The voice became even colder. It seemed like Mo Chuan's voice. Chen Ning was suddenly startled and she suddenly opened her eyes. The first thing that came into view was a familiar face, extremely handsome brows, and a cold aura that emanated from his body. It really was Mo Chuan. She had already returned to the capital city for a day and a night, but Mo Chuan had not appeared at all. Although Chen Ning did not ask, she knew that Mo Chuan had something important to do, otherwise he would have appeared. She really wanted to know what had happened, and she knew that the most important thing right now was to save Chu Xiaobai, but in her dream, she couldn't help dreaming of him. For a moment, she couldn't tell if she was dreaming or if she was really seeing Mo Chuan. She found that she was tightly held in Imo Chuan's embrace and her right arm was being forcefully pulled by Gu Qingze. The two men were facing each other like two fighting cocks, staring at each other. Chen Ning was a bit confused, not knowing what was going on. She blinked and softly said, "Imo Chuan." Imo Chuan quickly looked down at her and his eyes were filled with a familiar passion. He looked at her with surprise and joy and said in a voice filled with disbelief, "Ning, you're awake." Chen Ning's sense of reality became even stronger. She was already sure that she wasn't dreaming and that Imo Chuan was really here, tightly hugging her. "Chen Ning, who is he?" Gu Qingze knit his brows and looked at Imo Chuan with an unfriendly expression. He just leaned against the bed and took a nap. When he opened his eyes again, he saw a tall, unfamiliar man suddenly appear in the room. No one knew when he had appeared, and no one asked anything. Chapter 1144. A burst of anger came from Gu Qingze's chest. Such a bold lecher, actually taking advantage of his beloved disciple and doing it right in front of his eyes. Did he think that his master was easy to deal with? Although he didn't know martial arts, he knew that this black-clothed man that suddenly appeared was a martial arts expert, but he was not afraid at all. His right hand gently pulled on the armrest of the chair and with a so sound, a bunch of black hair needles shot out at the black-clothed man. Who would have thought that this black-clothed man's martial arts would be this good? His hidden weapons had been sent out by surprise and his back was facing the black-clothed man, but it was like the man had eyes on the back of his head. His figure gently floated to the side and the large bunch of needles hit empty air, but he was not injured at all. Gu Qingze jumped out of the chair and charged in front of the black-clothed man. He reached out to grab Chen Ning's right arm and angrily shouted at the black-clothed man. "Ning, who is he?" Imo Chuan also asked. Chen Ning looked at Imo Chuan and then at Gu Qingze. Seeing their tight faces and the flames that shot out from their eyes, she suddenly felt a headache coming on. "Imo Chuan, put me down first." She came down from Imo Chuan's embrace and looked around the room. Only then did she find that other than the unconscious Chu Xiaobai on the bed and the sleeping Dr. Zhang leaning against the chair, there were only the three of them. Shui Feng, Xiao Si, and Xiao Ru had all disappeared. When they saw Imo Chuan appear, they all quietly left. Chen Ning cleared her throat. "Imo Chuan, this is the #1 divine doctor in the world, the ancient divine doctor that I invited back this time." She looked at Imo Chuan and a faint blush appeared on her face. "Master, he is my husband, also. She hesitated a bit, not knowing if she should say Imo Chuan's identity. Because on the way here, she had not told Gu Qingze that she was the current Empress. She was not sure how Gu Qingze would react if he knew this. Imo Chuan's eyes turned cold as he stared at Gu Qingze. "You call him master? Is he really the #1 divine doctor in the world?" His tone was the same as when Shui Feng and Xiao Si saw Gu Qingze for the first time. As soon as he saw Gu Qingze, his first reaction was, "So young. How could he be the #1 divine doctor in the world? He must be a swindler. Ning must have been tricked by him." She actually recognized him as her master. His chest filled with rage. Imo Chuan's domineering aura unknowingly appeared. Even the most senior ministers in the court did not dare take a deep breath in front of him. But it seemed like Gu Qingze did not feel his pressure at all. He raised his chin and looked at Imo Chuan with a disdainful gaze. His voice was just as cold and arrogant as Imo Chuan's. "Chen girl, he is your husband. Ning, you don of him." "Humph, he only has a good-looking face and his martial arts are so-so. Other than that, I can't see anything special about him." Gu Qingze's first impression of Imo Chuan was not that great, just like how Imo Chuan had the same impression of him. Chapter 1145. Who? Who's calling me? Dr. Zhang heard someone mention his name in his sleep and his white beard trembled as he drowsily opened his eyes. It's King Jing'an. Did something happen to King Jing'an? He was most worried that Chu Xiaobai's injuries would change again, so he was worried even in his dreams. So, when he opened his eyes, he looked at Chu Xiaobai on the bed and found that he was sleeping very peacefully. His heart that was in his throat instantly fell down. He looked at Mo Chuan in the room and quickly got up from the chair, preparing to kneel down and kowtow. This old minister greets. Before he finished, Mo Chuan had already cut him off. He raised his right hand and a gentle force supported his knees, not letting him kneel down. No need to be so polite. Mo Chuan could see that Dr. Zhang's eyes were completely red and his expression was filled with exhaustion. It was clear that in order to save Chu Xiaobai, he had already done his best and his heart was filled with gratitude. Dr. Zhang, how is Xiaobai's condition? Actually, even if he didn't ask, Mo Chuan could see that Chu Xiaobai's condition was much better than before. He could already see Chu Xiaobai's chest slightly moving up and down, he could already breathe on his own. King Jing'an's condition has already stabilized and his pulse has become very stable. Last night was truly dangerous, it's all thanks to Gu. Dr. Zhang checked Chu Xiaobai's pulse again and revealed a look of joy. He was prepared to praise Gu Qing's medical skills. Mo Chuan raised his hand and cut him off again. I understand, it's all thanks to Dr. Zhang's hard work. Please do your best and help Xiaobai wake up as soon as possible. Dr. Zhang shook his hand and said, No. No. It's not this old minister, it's all because of Gu. He wanted to say that this was all because of the divine Dr. Gu, but Mo Chuan did not give him a chance to speak. She's tired, so I'll bring her to rest. I'll have to trouble Dr. Zhang to take care of this. After saying this, Mo Chuan's right hand reached out and he picked up Qin Ning. His figure swayed and he had already left the room, disappearing outside. Dr. Zhang looked in the direction Mo Chuan disappeared in and he couldn't help grabbing his beard, this. He could see that the emperor had an unfriendly expression towards Dr. Gu. From the beginning to the end, he did not look at Dr. Gu. Moreover, his words clearly showed that he did not believe in Dr. Gu. Divine Dr. Gu, please don't blame me, it's all my fault. It's all because I didn't have time to explain the situation to the emperor. It's all because I didn't have time to explain it to the emperor. It was all because the emperor heard the Empress's explanation that he would personally thank the divine Dr. Gu. Gu Qingzi didn't seem to understand his words. He frowned and said, What did you say? Then she. Shen girl, could it be the Empress? She. Dr. Zhang said with a nod, That's right, does divine Dr. Gu not know? Gu Qingzi stared fixedly at him. His face, which had never changed in 10,000 years, finally showed some ripples. Interesting, truly interesting. I never thought that she would be the Empress. Does this mean that I've taken the Empress as my disciple? His lips curled up and he revealed a self-mocking smile, but that smile did not reach his eyes and disappeared in a flash. Chapter 1146. Mo Chuan carried Qin Ning out of Chu Xiaobai's room and turned into another room. He closed the room and put her down. He looked at her quietly. At this time, the sky was just beginning to light up, and the morning light had whitened the window paper. The faint halo of light shone on her head, face, and body. She was like a beautiful pearl, and her whole body exuded a bright luster, making him unable to move his eyes away. They hadn't seen each other for over 10 days, but in these past 10 days, he had been thinking about her day and night. He was afraid that something would happen to her on the way and he had secretly regretted it many times. He shouldn't have been soft-hearted and agreed to let her leave the capital city alone. At this time, seeing her standing in front of him unscathed, his heart was filled with waves of joy. He just wanted to hold her tightly in his arms and tell her the pain of lovesickness. But when he thought of the scene just now, the warmth in his chest suddenly froze. It was like a bucket of cold water had been poured over him, freezing all of his passion. Master! Her voice was soft and delicate. When she shouted out those two words, it was very pleasant to hear. His heart skipped a beat when he heard them. But these two words were used to call a young unfamiliar man. That young man without any hair on his mouth was the divine doctor she had invited back this time. She was actually calling him master in such an intimate manner. In these past 10 days, what had happened between them? Why did she call that man master? Mo Chuan felt a surge of jealousy from the bottom of his heart. His passionate eyes became as deep as ink, not revealing any emotions at all. Mo Chuan, what happened? Your face doesn't look good, is it because you didn't sleep last night? Chen Ning's heart was beating fast and her face was red from Mo Chuan's passionate gaze. He carried her away without saying a word and came to an empty room. She thought that he would give her a passionate kiss, but his eyes gradually changed. They went from passionate to deep. His chest rose and fell and his handsome face seemed to be covered in a layer of frost. She immediately knew that Mo Chuan's mood was not good, very bad. Mo Chuan did not say a word and just stared at her. He indeed did not sleep last night, how could his face be good? When she came back, not only did she not care about him, she even said that his face was not good enough. His face was not good, but that divine Dr. Gu something's face was good enough. Mo Chuan had a stomach full of fire and adding in the troublesome matter he had encountered, his heart was filled with annoyance. When he saw her, his heart was filled with joy, but it was immediately messed up by that fellow surnamed Gu. Mo Chuan, are you angry? Chen Ning saw the faint flames in his eyes. She thought that Mo Chuan did not show any emotions, so for him to be moved, it must have been a very serious matter. Of course he was angry, very angry. Mo Chuan continued to stare at her. He really wanted to loudly ask her, why didn't she break free when that goose-something fellow was holding her arm? But because of the man's pride, he couldn't ask. Tell me, what happened? Chen Ning looked at his black as ink face and her heart filled with worry. Something very important had indeed happened, but in Mo Chuan's heart, there was nothing more important than her. Do you still need to ask me what you did? He finally said in a low voice. Chapter 1147. Chen Ning found that Mo Chuan's current appearance was indeed angry, but it was very strange. It was clear that he was jealous. As for who he was jealous of, that was the lice on the monk's head. It was clear that other than Gu Qingze, there was no one else. But why would he be jealous of Gu Qingze? She didn't do anything to make him jealous, right? Her eyes turned and she suddenly thought of something. The problem must be with her calling him master. Mo Chuan, are you angry with me? She stood in front of him and looked up at him. Her voice was low and gentle, just like a small brush, brushing across his heart. It was ticklish and warm. Mo Chuan turned his head to the side, not looking at her. Chen Ning couldn't help giving a gentle laugh. He looked like a child throwing a tantrum, he didn't look like the ruler of a country at all. He was clearly jealous and throwing a tantrum, but he had to act like nothing was wrong and let her coax him. She slowly moved closer to him, leaning against his warm and firm chest. The sweet scent that belonged to her filled his breath. Although Mo Chuan did not look at her, the jealousy and anger in his heart had unknowingly disappeared. His right arm moved slightly, wanting to grab her waist, but it immediately fell to his side. Chen Ning gave a soft laugh. She raised her hand and turned his face to face with her. You're the ruler of a country, how could you be so petty? She muttered in a small voice. Mo Chuan immediately said, I'm petty. How am I petty? It's clearly you. He glared at her, as if he wanted to eat her into his stomach. What about me? I just called him Master. His medical skills are so high and he's the #1 divine doctor in the world, wanting to take me in as his last disciple. This is a blessing that others can't even beg for. I can become the disciple of a divine doctor. Aren't you happy for me? Look at you, your face is no different from a donkey's. If it's not petty, then what is it? Chen Ning purposely pursed her lips, pretending to be angry. Mo Chuan was so angry that his stomach almost burst from her words. He angrily and hatefully stared at her. After not seeing her for a few days, she already despised him. Did his face look like a donkey's? Did that surnamed Gu's face not look like a donkey's? Mo Chuan, the divine Dr. Gu's medical skills are very high. You weren't here yesterday, but Dr. Zhang, Shui Feng, and I all saw it clearly. If it wasn't for him using all his strength to save Xiao Bai would not have recovered this quickly. Do you know? Xiao Bai is already breathing and has a pulse, but he has a fever and a cold. There have been many accidents in one night, but the ancient divine doctor can find a way to cure him every time. He really is a divine doctor. I have never seen a better doctor than him. Woo! Mo Xiao Chuan's words. Xiao Chen was that Chuan's words. Mo was Ning. Heard she did not. He did not want to listen. As he didn't want to hear even half a word of praise for another man from her mouth, not to mention that she had praised him so many times in a row. Every word was praising that man's good. No was for him. For him. No. His face was getting uglier and uglier, but she didn't notice it at all. She was still talking non-stop. Chapter 1148. Wu Mo Chuan. Chen Ning's voice came out from under his lips and was completely swallowed by him, not being able to say a single word. Her mind was completely blank because Mo Chuan's fierce and overbearing kiss made it hard for her to breathe. His tongue was like a fish swimming in the deep sea, nimbly entangling the tip of her tongue, making her face turn red. She had kissed him many times, but he had never kissed her so deeply before. That kiss, which was filled with anger and punishment, was more like abuse, and more like possession. Was he declaring his sovereignty? Chen Ning's body was tightly held in Mo Chuan's embrace, with not a single gap between the two of them. She was forced to raise her head to receive his kiss, but his large pressure made it hard for her to breathe and her body felt weak. If it wasn't for his large palm holding her waist, she would have already turned into a pool of warm water in his embrace. Unknowingly, the tyrannical and possessive kiss slowly changed. The movements of his tongue became gentle, teasing the tip of her tongue to entangle with him. Her face turned hot and her heart sped up. She couldn't help reaching out to grab his neck, responding to his kiss. In the end, she was met with an even more fierce attack from him. Mo Chuan, let me catch my breath. She pushed him away with great difficulty and took in a breath of fresh air. His lips chased after her again and tightly pressed against her lips. He carried her and walked to the bed to the side. He carried her onto the bed and pressed her down, continuing to kiss her in a domineering and passionate manner. She was trapped like this, unable to break free and could only endure his kiss. Her face was red and her heart was beating like a little deer. Her long eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings, covering her dark and intoxicated eyes. This kiss of his seemed like he had released all the passion and lovesickness he had accumulated over the past few days. But did he need to be this fierce and domineering? It wasn't like she didn't want him to kiss her. Did he need to be this thirsty? After an unknown amount of time, Mo Chuan finally raised his head and his lips moved away from hers, but his body was still pressed against hers, imprisoning her and making her unable to move. Speak, does my face look like a donkey's face? He asked in a stiff voice as he stared at her without blinking. Her face was flushed red like a blooming crabapple flower, incomparably tender and beautiful. Her lips had become moist and moist from his kiss, like a ripe fruit, fragrant and sweet. Hearing this, she raised her eyelashes in shock and widened her eyes. Those slightly widened eyes were especially charming and enchanting, causing the fire that had been suppressed in his body for a long time to suddenly soar. With a poochieth sound, she gave a soft laugh. She never thought that he would mind her casual joke this much. "Say, don't we look alike?" he asked again as his eyes sparkled like fire. "Yes." She suppressed her laughter and deliberately said. Mo Chuan's brows jumped up. He lifted her chin and kissed her again without saying a word. Good, she had such a sharp tongue, he had to grind her sharp teeth. His tempestuous kisses left her breathless again. "Say it again, don't we look alike?" Mo Chuan only let go of her when she couldn't breathe. Chen Ning's face was as red as a ripe crab. She angrily glared at him, and seeing that he was about to lower his head again, she quickly raised her hand to cover his lips. Chapter 1149. Mo Chuan was still not satisfied as he continued to ask, "Is his face prettier or is mine prettier?" Chen Ning almost couldn't help laughing. When this man was jealous, he was just like a child that hadn't grown up yet. She was afraid of his fierce and fiery kisses, so she could only obediently soothe him and calm his jealousy. "Of course you're prettier. You're the prettiest man in the world." She thought that there was nothing wrong with these words, but Mo Chuan's face became even uglier. "You've seen all the men in the world, Un." He threateningly raised his brows. She felt angry and funny at the same time. Why didn't she find out that he was such a difficult man to deal with before marrying him? If she knew it would be like this, she wouldn't have married him no matter what. "Of course not, but in my eyes, there is no one better than you," she said in a soft voice. Then she hooked her arms around his neck and gently kissed his lips. This rare kiss from her made all of Mo Chuan's anger and jealousy disappear. Especially when she said, "There is no one better than you," it made his heart feel sweet and every pore on his body was smiling. "Ning, I missed you very much." He deeply looked into her eyes and kissed her lips again. She raised her head to receive his kiss, feeling a bit scared. She was afraid that he would be as overbearing and direct as before. But this time, he became gentle and affectionate. His lips were soft and warm. They slowly deepened and became fiery. The numb feeling spread to her limbs and bones, making her feel ecstatic. This was her Mo Chuan, the gentle and affectionate Mo Chuan. She secretly opened her eyes and looked down at him. His long eyelashes drooped, covering his bottomless black eyes, as well as the boundless affection in his eyes. But his kiss vividly expressed his longing and affection. His face was handsome, and his nose was straight. His breath intertwined with hers, and she could feel the surrounding air heating up. She looked at his handsome face in a somewhat infatuated manner, thinking that she wasn't lying. He was just this good-looking, she couldn't get enough of him. While she was thinking, she suddenly felt a pain on the tip of her tongue. Mo Chuan had actually bitten her. It was unknown when, but Mo Chuan had opened his eyes and his dark eyes were looking at her. Seeing her red cheeks and blurred eyes, he was very dissatisfied. In this kind of sweet and intoxicating moment, she was actually thinking about something else. Could it be that he didn't kiss her well enough? "You're not allowed to like him." He used a domineering and threatening tone. Counting with his fingers, there wasn't much time left until Dr. Zhang said 1 month. He almost couldn't endure it any longer. When she wasn't by his side, he would think about her every day. But she really did come back. Hugging and kissing her like this, the temperature rose rapidly. The fire in his body burned more and more fiercely, and the anger in his chest had all turned into the fire of passion, burning fiercely. He lowered his head to look at her in his arms. Her cheeks were red and her eyes were watery. She was like a flower blooming under him, making his heart beat faster. Like who? Chen Ning was a bit confused. Then she suddenly realized and couldn't help laughing. You mean Gu Qingze? Hearing her mentioning that man's name, Mo Chuan Chuk. Mo. Chapter 1150. Mo Chuan's fingers gently stroked her soft cheeks. Her taste was as sweet as honey, deeply intoxicating him. The temperature in the room rose again and the flames in his body quickly spread to her body. Both of their bodies became burning hot. His hand unknowingly slid down her collar and touched the softness of her chest. She gently trembled under him and did not avoid him. She only raised her dark and moist eyes and looked at his face that had become fanatical because of the confusion of passion. Mo Chuan, has it been a month already? She softly whispered. It was like a bucket of cold water had been poured over Mo Chuan's head and he suddenly sobered up. He turned around and left her body. Standing in front of the bed, he took a few deep breaths before giving her an apologetic smile. He helped her fix her clothes that had been messed up and pulled her up from the bed. Holding her in front of his chest, he raised her chin and gently kissed her lips. It's all your fault, making me angry as soon as you came back. He did not dare kiss her deeply, just gently kissing her lips like this and gently caressing her lips. It was ticklish. She wanted to dodge, but his large palm was on the back of her head, so she couldn't dodge. You were clearly the one who was jealous. What does it have to do with me? Her voice came out from under his lips in an unclear voice. His sips were even more enticing than his deep kiss. It made her heart beat wildly and her face turn even redder. You still dare say it? Why did you take another man as your master without my permission? Did you ask for my consent? He spoke in a domineering and threatening voice while biting her lips. I did it to save Xiao Bai. She said. No matter what the reason is, I don't like him being close to you and I don't like you calling him master. If you want to learn medicine, I'll have Dr. Zhang teach you. I don't believe that brat who hasn't even grown hair is a divine doctor. Mo Chuan finally left her lips. He looked up and his deep, black eyes sparkled with a faint glow. Mo Chuan, don't be unreasonable, all right? Chen Ning found this both funny and angry. She couldn't help stomping her feet and rolling her eyes at him. If it wasn't for Gu Qingze yesterday, how could Xiao Bai be safe? His medical skills are clear to everyone here. If you don't believe me, you can ask Zhui Feng. He is your bodyguard, he wouldn't dare lie in front of you. Mo Chuan didn't need to ask to believe Zhui Feng, but his heart was uncomfortable and he was filled with regret. If he knew that the #1 divine doctor in the world was this young, he wouldn't have asked Ning to invite him. If it was said that he had good intentions in taking Ning as his disciple, he wouldn't believe it. If he really was the world's #1 genius doctor, then there would be countless people who wanted to worship him as their master. What kind of disciple couldn't he accept? Why would he want to take her as his disciple? Why did he want to take her as his disciple? Only someone as pure as Ning would believe his lies and think that the other side really wanted to take her in as a disciple because of her talent. But Mo Chuan's eyes did not have a single grain of sand. Gu Qingze. Xiao. He can forget about using such a method to deceive Ning. Chapter 1151. Mo Chuan, after I left, did something big happen in the palace. Chen Ning saw that he wasn't speaking and his brows were tightly knit. She didn't ask about Gu Qingze's matter and immediately thought of the reason why he wasn't here yet. Mo Chuan's heart skipped a beat. This was a good chance to take her away from Gu Qingze's side. That's right, something big did happen and it is very troublesome. Ning, I need you. He held her hand and stared at her. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat. It was rare to see him with this kind of serious expression. Especially when he said, "I need you," it made her heart feel sweet and warm. "Tell me, what happened?" "Mo Chuan, no matter what happens, I will stand by your side and face it with you. If there is any difficulty, we can solve it together." She looked up and said with a firm expression. "All right, but this matter is quite complicated. There are many years here, so come back to the palace with me first and I'll tell you everything in detail." Mo Chuan held her hand and asked, "How is Xiao Bai's condition?" "That Gu Divine Doctor's medical skills are really as amazing as you say." He spoke with a bit of disbelief. Chen Ning nodded, "His medical skills are unfathomable." Chen Ning nodded, "His medical skills are unfathomable. Xiao Bai was in danger several times last night and it was all because of him that Xiao Bai was saved. Mo Chuan, I promised him that as long as he cured Xiao Bai, I would take him as my master. He is not a swindler, you don't know how much effort I spent to invite him to the capital city to cure Xiao Bai. If you anger him away and something happens to Xiao Bai, I will never forgive you in this life." Mo Chuan thought that it really was like this. She was already convinced by that fellow surnamed Gu, but he believed that he would have a way to make her give up on the idea of taking him as her master. He declined to comment and looked out the window. "Let's go back to the palace first, I have something important to tell you." "All right, wait for me to tell master." Chen Ning saw Mo Chuan's serious expression and knew that the matter he wanted to tell her was very confidential. So she went to the room on the side and asked Gu Qingze about Chu Xiao Bai's condition. Then she told him that she had to temporarily leave. "Master, I have something I need to do. I'll have to ask Master to take care of Xiao Bai's condition." Gu Qingze softly looked at her and then turned to look out the window. He saw Mo Chuan's tall figure standing in front of the window with a smile of ridicule on his lips. "Little girl Chen, I don't care what your identity is, but do you still remember the conditions you promised me?" "Chen Ning, I don't care about your identity," Chen Ning said. With Chen Ning's intelligence, she could immediately tell that Gu Qingze already knew her identity. "Then go. I'm here, so don't worry." Gu Qingze nodded to her before turning to Dr. Zhang and saying, "Old man, my disciple isn't here, so you have to continue helping me." Dr. Zhang was surprised and happy. He raised his beard and said, "Being able to help the ancient divine doctor is this old man's honor. Divine doctor, please give your orders." Chen Ning walked in front of the bed and deeply looked at Chu Xiao Bai. Right now, he was sleeping very peacefully and his pulse was calm. He was completely different from his previous lifeless appearance. Chapter 1152. Xiao Bai, you have to get better. I still have a lot of things I want to tell you. You haven't done what you promised me yet, so you can't go back on your word, do you understand? Chen Ning held his hand. His fingers already had a bit of warmth and were no longer as cold as ice. Chu Xiao Bai quietly closed his eyes with a calm expression. "Chen girl, he can't hear you right now. If you have anything to say, wait until he's better. Aren't you going to leave? There are people waiting for you outside. Go, go." Gu Qingze couldn't stand women crying the most. He had an impatient look on his face as he urged her. Chen Ning wiped her tears and forcefully held Chu Xiao Bai's hand before turning to leave. Mo Chuan's expression was serious. He did not directly bring her back to the palace, but rather found a place with no one and slowly spoke. "Ning, do you know Northern Qi?" Chen Ning nodded. She had already heard the eldest princess say that the continent was divided into East Qin, Southern Mountain, West Chu, and Northern Qi. In terms of military strength, East Qin and Southern Mountain were the most powerful. West Chu had been paying tribute to East Qin for many years and had almost become a vassal of East Qin. This made Southern Mountain look at East Qin like a tiger watching its prey, seeing it as a fat piece of meat. They always wanted to take it into their pockets. As for the northernmost country, Northern Qi, it had maintained a neutral attitude from beginning to end. It had diplomatic relations with the other three countries. Although East Qin and Southern Mountain had their eyes on Northern Qi, because of Northern Qi's special location, they did not dare to make any rash moves. After Mo Chuan analyzed the delicate situation of the countries, he said, East Qin and Southern Mountain have not attacked Northern Qi. There is another important reason. In the extreme north of Northern Qi, there is a very rare ore. A light flashed in Chen Ning's mind and she blurted out, profound cold iron stone. She suddenly thought of the prize she had won at the lantern show. Chu Xiaobai said it was an incomparably rare profound cold iron stone. You also know about profound cold iron stone? Mo Chuan was a little surprised and then he shook his head and said, it's not profound cold iron stone. Profound cold iron stone is much more precious. The ore produced in Northern Qi is called profound iron stone and it contains profound iron. After refining it into weapons, ordinary iron will become sharp, making it a rare treasure. However, this kind of ore can only be produced by a few snowy peaks in Northern Qi, and the quantity is very small. Northern Qi firmly controls the black iron mine in their hands, and all of the produced black iron is sent to the palace, where the craftsmen appointed by the state are responsible for forging weapons. Thus, the quality of Northern Qi's weapons is the best of the three countries. It is also because of this that Dongqin and Southern Mountain have never dared to invade Northern Qi. Chen Ning's eyes flashed and she said, I think what East Qin and Nan you want the most is the black iron mine in Northern Qi, right? Mo Chuan gave her a look of praise, not bad, but other than that, they also want the blueprints of Northern Qi's weapons. Not only does Northern Qi have black iron mines, they also have skilled craftsmen that can forge incomparably sharp weapons, such as crossbows. Repeating crossbows. Chen Ning's eyes opened wide. Chapter 1153. But Northern Qi kept the method of forging the crossbow a secret. East Qin and Southern Mountain spent a lot of money to obtain it, but they couldn't get it. What I didn't think was that Northern Qi would suddenly send an envoy to the capital and take the initiative to sell the 5 repeating crossbow blueprint to West Chu. This was something I never dreamed of. Chen Ning noticed that there was no joy on Mo Chuan's face. Instead, he deeply furrowed his brows. She knew that something must have happened. What happened after that? What happened? She asked in a soft voice. Mo Chuan said in a deep voice, at the time, I was surprised and happy, but I also felt that this matter was too sudden. West Chu and Northern Qi have always minded our own business, and our two countries are only acquaintances. For Northern Qi to suddenly give me such a great benefit, I couldn't help but suspect that they had some ulterior motives, so I didn't immediately agree. The Northern Qi envoy saw that I was hesitating, so he generously took out their crossbow blueprint for me to look at. I carefully looked at it, and the blueprint was indeed the method of forging the 5 repeating crossbow. As long as I followed the blueprint, I would definitely be able to forge a crossbow as powerful as Northern Qi's. So I readily agreed. The Northern Qi envoy gave me a price. It wasn't a sky-high price, but rather a very reasonable one. My heart was filled with joy, so I agreed to complete the transaction in 3 days. I would hand over the money and the blueprint. Who would have thought that on the night of the 3rd day, something would suddenly happen? Someone would sneak into the Northern Qi guest house and steal the blueprint for the 5 repeating crossbow. Saying this, Mo Chuan's right hand clenched into a fist and forcefully swung it. His eyes revealed a look of hatred. The weapon blueprint was stolen. Chen Ning's first reaction was, could it be that the Northern Qi envoy stole it? Mo Chuan said, let me continue. The theft of the blueprint was very strange. When I heard the news, my first thought was the same as yours. It must have been the Northern Qi envoy deliberately mystifying us and stole it. He hid the blueprint and threw the dirty water on our West Chu. But when I found out what happened, I found that it wasn't like what I thought. That night, the Northern Qi emissary and everyone in the hostel were poisoned by a strange incense and fell into a deep slumber. However, there was one exception. One of the guards, who had a stomachache, went to relieve himself just before dawn and was not affected by the incense. When he came out, he saw a masked man in black sneaking out of the Northern Qi emissary's room. He immediately rushed forward and knocked the masked man unconscious from behind. Then, he found that everyone in the hostel was unconscious. Pale with fright, he rushed into the room to wake the emissary. Chapter 1154. Aw. Chen Ning let out a soft cry, and then Mo Chuan tightly knit his brows and said, "After this happened, the Northern Qi envoy insisted that I sent people to poison them and then stole the blueprint. They wanted me to hand over the blueprint, otherwise they would not let it go. This really did happen in the guest house. If I can't find the blueprint, I can't explain this even if I have a mouth. But the person who stole the blueprint was clearly caught by them, but he didn't have the blueprint on him. This is really strange." Chen Ning thought for a moment and said, "It's hard to say that they didn't want to steal what they were guarding. The thief cried thief, so they deliberately set up a diversion. Otherwise, how could they not find the stolen goods on the thief? Could it be that he swallowed the blueprint into his stomach?" Mo Chuan said, "I also thought of this, but after the black-clothed man committed suicide, the Northern Qi emissary used a knife to cut open his stomach, but they didn't find the blueprints. As for the black-clothed man's identity and background, we don't know. The only thing we can be sure of is that he is from West Chu. That's why the Northern Qi emissary insists that this was done by West Chu. Mo Chuan, there must be a mastermind behind this. That black-clothed man was just a pawn used by someone else." Chen Ning said with certainty, "He committed suicide by poison to hide the truth for the mastermind. Once he dies, finding the mastermind will be as hard as ascending to the heavens." "That's right, but even if we find the mastermind, will we be able to find the blueprint?" This was what Mo Chuan was worried about the most. Chen Ning thought for a bit and said, "How many people know that the Northern Qi envoy wanted to sell the blueprint?" Mo Chuan looked at her and said, "Only me and the Minister of War, Li Zhixing, know about this. I am not familiar with the blueprint of the quintuple-linked crossbow. I once summoned Li Zhixing to the palace and showed him this blueprint. He is proficient in the art of forging, so after seeing this blueprint, he is very sure that this blueprint is the blueprint for the quintuple-linked crossbow." "So you're saying that the person who knows the value of this blueprint is Li Zhixing?" Chen Ning said after some thought. "He is very suspicious, but besides him, there is another suspicious person." Mo Chuan took a deep breath and slowly said, "Who?" According to the Northern Qi envoy, he wanted to protect the blueprint and was afraid of losing it, so he stayed in the guest house for 3 days. But on the second day, an unexpected guest came to visit him. That person was, Mo Chuan slowly said, "King Ding Yuan, Chu Xiaoyang." Chu Xiaoyang. Chen Ning was shocked and looked at Mo Chuan, Chu Xiao. Chu Xiaoyang. Chen Ning was Chu Xiaoqing. Mo Chuan slowly shook his head. The Northern Qi envoy said that he and Chu Xiaoyang did not know each other, but he heard that the other party was King Ding Yuan. He was too embarrassed to reject him, so he invited Chu Xiaoyang in. The two of them drank tea and chatted for half a day, talking about all sorts of romantic matters. When it was almost noon, he wanted to ask Chu Xiaoyang to stay for a meal, but Chu Xiaoyang did not stay and left. The Northern Qi envoy was still confused, not understanding why Chu Xiaoyang would visit. So when the blueprint was stolen, the first person he suspected was Chu Xiaoyang. Chen Mo Ning Chen Chu Chs Shen and Chapter 1155. They did not know each other, came to visit, sat there for half a day, and then left in a hurry. Each and every one of these things was unusual. Then what happened next? Chen Ning looked up at Mo Chuan. Later, I sent soldiers to surround the guest house, not allowing anyone to enter or leave. I did not believe that the blueprint would disappear. The Northern Qi emissary was overbearing and aggressive, forcing me to hand over the blueprint. But the more he acted like this, the more I felt that he had something to do with it. It was very likely that he was a thief crying thief, but at the same time, Li Zhixing and Chu Xiaoyang were both suspects of stealing the blueprint. Mo Chuan took a deep breath and raised his hand, rubbing his eyebrows. Now, I have both Li Zhixing and Chu Xiaoyang under house arrest in the palace, and I have interrogated them, but the two of them do not admit that they had anything to do with the blueprint theft. Li Zhixing said that he was with his family that night, and his fifth concubine can testify for him, but Chu Xiaoyang, he is not willing to say where he was that night, or what he did, so the most suspicious person is Chu Xiaoyang. Chen Ning nodded and said, "That's right, he is the most suspicious." How did he explain visiting the Northern Qi emissary? Mo Chuan said, he said he did not know what the blueprint was. He only heard that Northern Qi had sent an emissary, and he was bored in his manner, so he went to talk to the Northern Qi emissary about Northern Qi's customs and people to relieve his boredom. This story is full of holes, and it is not convincing at all. But he insisted that the blueprint theft had nothing to do with him. I sent people to search Li Zhixing's and Chu Xiaoyang's manors, but we couldn't find any clues about the blueprint. It was as if the blueprint had disappeared into thin air and the person who stole it couldn't determine which of the two did it. Perhaps it was someone else. After he finished speaking, his relaxed eyebrows furrowed again. Ning, you seem to have the ability to see through people's hearts. Whether someone is lying or not, you can tell with a glance. Only you can help me with this matter. Are you willing to help me? He thought back to the first time he met her. His eyes could be considered sharp, but he was still blinded by that swindler who sold himself to bury his father. But she easily saw through the swindler's scam. It was because of this that she attracted his attention. The closer he got to her, the more he realized that she had this strange ability. Her eyes seemed to have the ability to see through many of the subtle thoughts that he had hidden in his heart. It was as if her eyes had the ability to see through everything. So when this happened, the first person he thought of was her. If only she was here. Chen Ning immediately understood Mo Chuan's meaning and nodded without any hesitation. Of course I'm willing. Mo Chuan, if someone is lying, then it must be the Northern Qi envoy, the Minister of War Li Zhixing, or one of the three Chu Xiaoyang. No matter who stole the blueprint, I think the most important thing to do right now is to find the stolen blueprint. Chapter 1156. Chen Ning's eyes lit up, you're right. Since it's like this, the blueprint can only be in one place. Where? Mo Chuan's eyes also lit up. The guest house. She said with certainty. Mo Chuan immediately shook his head, impossible. I've already sent people to carefully search the guest house. Every room has been dug 3 feet deep. Everyone in the guest house has been searched, but they haven't found the blueprint. You really searched every place? Chen Ning said thoughtfully. That's right. I personally led people to search. Mo Chuan nodded with certainty. Did you search the room where the Northern Qi emissary lived? The first place I searched was that room. Mo Chuan said. Every corner. Every place. Of course. Chen Ning curled her lips. No, there's one place you definitely didn't search. Mo Chuan said without even thinking, I have personally searched every place and I have searched very carefully. The box with the blueprint, did you search it? That box is clear, it's empty. The blueprint was originally placed in the box, but it's gone. Mo Chuan said. He looked at Chen Ning, looking at him with a smile that wasn't a smile, and suddenly realized something. You're saying that there's a hidden layer in the box? I'm not sure if there's a hidden layer in the box. After all, I haven't seen the box before. But other than there, I can't think of any other place the thief would put the blueprint, if you really searched everywhere. Chen Ning said in a calm voice. Mo Chuan couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air. So you're saying that it really was the Northern Qi envoy who stole it? Only the Northern Qi envoy would know that there's a hidden layer in the box, so it must be him. No. This is only one of the possibilities. Mo Chuan, we need to find that box now and see if the blueprint is still in the box. Some things are just my speculations, so we have to see it with our own eyes. Chen Ning said. Mo Chuan nodded and said, all right, let's go to the Northern Qi guest house now. Because the theft of the blueprint was very serious, the guest house was heavily guarded by Mo Chuan's imperial guards. Not even a fly could fly in. Not many people knew that the Northern Qi envoy had brought the blueprint to West Chu. Mo Chuan hid the fact that the blueprint was stolen even more. Others only knew that the Northern Qi envoy had lost an important item, but no one knew that it was the quintuple crossbow blueprint. The Northern Qi envoy was basically under house arrest in the guest house and could not leave. When he heard that the West Chu Emperor and Empress had arrived, he didn't even come out. Mo Chuan and Chen Ning appeared at the door. The Northern Qi envoy looked up and coldly said, "Did you catch the thief?" "No." Mo Chuan shook his head. He was not angered by the Northern Qi envoy's rude words. In reality, for something like this to happen, if the Northern Qi emissary had not stolen what he had been guarding, his reaction would have been perfectly normal. If he and the Northern Qi envoy were in a different place, he would probably be as angry as the envoy. The envoy that Chen the Chu the Ning," he said. His dissatisfaction was already overflowing with emotion, and he did not conceal it at all. Mo Chuan didn't get angry. He held Chen Ning's hand and walked into the room. Mo Chuan was not angry. He held Chen Ning's hand and walked into the room. Chapter 1157. The expressions of the royal guards behind Mo Chuan instantly changed. "How dare you mock the emperor? Do you know your crime?" The leader of the imperial guards couldn't hold back and shouted at the Northern Qi envoy. The Northern Qi envoy proudly raised his chin and sat motionless in his chair. He snorted, "What crime did I commit? Am I not speaking the truth?" Chen Ning stepped forward and spoke in a voice even colder than the Northern Qi envoy's. "Whether it is the truth or not, we will use the truth to speak. We have come this time to find out the truth." Her voice was as cold as ice, like pearls hitting a jade plate, clear and pleasant to the ear. The Northern Qi envoy couldn't help but raise his head and look at her a few times, his eyes slightly narrowing. "Woman. Who are you? This is a matter of national importance. What place do you, a woman, have?" His tone became even more disdainful as he said to Mo Chuan, "Your country really can't find anyone to actually let a woman come out and tell you what to do." Mo Chuan's expression froze, and a cold light suddenly flashed in his eyes. The Northern Qi envoy felt a chill on his back, and he couldn't help but swallow the rest of his words. He was originally arrogant, but after being glared at by Mo Chuan, he unconsciously lowered his arrogance. "Please speak with a bit of respect." "This is my Empress," Mo Chuan said coldly. "So it's the Empress. This envoy greets the Empress." The Northern Qi envoy's expression changed slightly. He finally stood up from his chair and reluctantly bowed to Chen Ning. "The Empress has also come. Could it be that you have found the stolen blueprint? Or have you found out the identity of the thief?" The sarcasm on his face became even stronger. Chen Ning's gaze was fixed on the envoy, observing his every expression. Hearing this, she faintly smiled. I have come this time to find the blueprint. I heard that it was placed in a box and disappeared. May I ask the envoy, where is that box now? The Northern Chi envoy laughed coldly. Of course the box is still there, but the blueprint is gone. The Empress, you are so powerful. Could it be that you want to make the blueprint come out of the box? Chen Ning calmly said, please take out the box and let me have a look. The Northern Chi envoy coldly looked at her and impatiently pointed at the table next to him. The box is over there. If the Empress wants to see it, please go ahead. Chen Ning looked in the direction of his finger. She saw an 8-treasure gold box with pearls open, revealing the silk inside. The box was completely empty. Is it this box? She walked over, picked up the box, weighed it in her hand, and put her hand in to feel it. The Northern Chi emissary laughed coldly. If you can conjure the blueprint out of the box, I will eat the 8-treasure golden box on the spot. Before he could finish speaking, his eyes suddenly widened, almost popping out of their sockets. He saw Chen Ning's hand come out of the box. Her slender fingers were holding a few pages of blueprints as she gently waved them in front of him. The Northern Chi envoy's jaw almost dropped. His face was full of disbelief as he stared dazedly at the map in Chen Ning's hand. Honorable envoy, may I ask if these are the blueprints that were stolen? Chen Ning looked over the paper. Seeing the densely packed figures on it, she already had an idea of what to do. Chapter 1158. Let me see, let me see. The Northern Chi envoy could not contain his excitement. He rushed forward and grabbed the blueprints from Chen Ning's hands, placing them in front of his eyes to examine them one by one. Correct, correct. These are the stolen blueprints. Not a single one is missing. His fingers trembled slightly. His face was full of disbelief. His mind was a mess. This was impossible. It was clearly an empty golden box. Where did the blueprints come from? Empress, these blueprints, where did you find them? The Northern Chi envoy felt that this matter was extremely strange and couldn't help but ask. Chen Ning lightly said, did you not see it just now? I took these blueprints out of this box. That's impossible, this box is clearly empty. You must have used some sort of trick. The Northern Chi envoy cried out involuntarily. Envoy, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. When I came here, my hands were empty. This box has always been in your room. What do you mean by that? Chen Ning's face darkened. She looked at him coldly. The envoy was stared at by her clear as ice and immediately swallowed the questions he wanted to ask. But where did these blueprints come from? He couldn't help but ask again. Envoy, perhaps you only saw the surface of the box and did not notice that there was a layer of mechanism in the box. Chen Ning lifted the brocade in her hands, revealing the golden bottom. She gently pulled it out and took out a thin golden plate. These blueprints were placed in the interlayer of this box. However, this interlayer is very thin and covered with brocade, so at first glance, the blueprints in the box have disappeared. In reality, the blueprints are still in the box. As she spoke, she stared intently at the Northern Chi envoy. Now, I would like to ask envoy, what is the matter with the interlayer of this box? What is the matter with the blueprints in this box? The blueprints are clearly still in the box. Why does the envoy insist that the blueprints have been stolen? Sir, you have poured this stolen bucket of dirty water on my west shoe. I would like to ask what your intentions are. Her string of questions was powerful and resonant. The Northern Chi envoy was dumbstruck and couldn't speak for a while. Because every one of her questions was accusing him of embezzlement. The Northern Chi envoy felt that he could not defend himself. He really did not know how to answer her questions. This box had always been in his room. Other than him, who else knew of the mechanism of this golden box? Who else could have done anything to this golden box? All the evidence pointed to one thing, and that was that he was the one who did it. He was the thief crying thief. He was the one who stole. The Northern Chi envoy only saw that everyone around him was looking at him with disdain, anger, and disdain. His entire body broke out in a cold sweat. It wasn't me. It really wasn't me. I didn't put the blueprint in the hidden compartment. I really didn't know that there was a hidden compartment in the box. He broke out in a cold sweat and his mind was in a mess. In his panic, he could only think of defending himself. The arrogant and despotic attitude he had just now disappeared without a trace. Because he knew that once the accusation of embezzlement was pinned on his head, he wouldn't be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the sea. In West Chu, even if Imo Chuan did not pursue this matter, once he returned to the country, the Northern Qi Emperor would not forgive him. Chapter 1159. Your Majesty, the facts are right before our eyes. We have caught the thief and the stolen goods. This Northern Qi is a thief crying thief. It was clearly him who hid the item, but he wrongly accused West Chu of stealing his treasure. Your Majesty, please issue a decree to arrest him and punish him. The leader of the Imperial Guard stepped forward and spoke in a clear voice. He raised his head and puffed out his chest. The indignation on his face had been swept away. He only felt elated and his chest was unspeakably free. These past few days, they had all felt extremely sullen. The arrogant appearance of the Northern Qi envoy after losing the item had made all of the Imperial Guards angry. But the item had indeed been lost in West Chu, and the thief was indeed from West Chu. All of the Northern Qi people in the guest house looked at them as if they were thieves, making them unable to raise their heads. Now that the Empress had come, the truth had come to light. So it was the Northern Qi envoy who was a thief crying thief and throwing dirty water on the West Chu people. It was truly a heinous crime. Your Majesty, please issue a decree to punish him. All of the Imperial Guard said in unison, their voices shaking the roof tiles. The Northern Qi people outside the door were all ashamed. They dejectedly lowered their heads, not daring to say a word. Imo Chuan's face was as dark as water. His black eyes were deep and bottomless as he coldly stared at the Northern Qi envoy. When the Northern Qi envoy's gaze met his entire body trembled. His legs went soft and his face became pale and terrified. Your Majesty, please believe me. This matter really has nothing to do with me. Your Majesty, Her Majesty the Empress, please be magnanimous and forgive this envoy's previous crime of rudeness. This envoy begs for forgiveness, please prove this envoy's innocence. All of his arrogance disappeared. He suddenly became much shorter. He almost knelt in front of Imo Chuan and Qin Ning to beg. Right now, he was like a drowning dog, battered and exhausted. Qin Ning gave a slight smile and said, Sir Envoy, there is no need to panic. I never said it was you who was a thief crying thief and stealing what you were guarding. The Northern Qi envoy felt his face burn as if someone had slapped him. Thinking of his previous rudeness, he was too ashamed to raise his head. Your Majesty, my words offended you, but this matter was not done by me. How could there be a hidden compartment in the box? I had no idea. He felt that even if he had 100 mouths, he would not be able to explain himself. This matter was already set in stone. Aside from him, there was no one else. He was the one who had lost the map, but they had been found in his room. The evidence was conclusive. For the first time, he felt what it was like to be wrongly accused. The evidence is clear, yet you still want. If it not you, then who? Your Majesty, please punish him and arrest him. The Imperial Guards were aggressive, and they all glared at the Northern Qi envoys. Mo Chuan slowly nodded. Anger rose in his chest as he stared coldly at the Northern Qi envoy. The other party was actually so cunning, using the name of selling blueprints to contact him, but actually doing such a despicable and dirty thing. If he dared to do it, he would have to take responsibility for it. Even if he beheaded him in public, the Northern Qi Emperor would not be able to say a word. Come. Arrest him. Mo Chuan said coldly. Hearing this, the strength in the Northern Qi envoy's body disappeared. He fell to the ground and collapsed into a ball. Chapter 1160. Just as the Imperial Guard surrounded the Northern Qi envoys, Chen Ning suddenly raised her hand and raised her voice to say, "Sir Envoy, I didn't say you stole the blueprint. I believe you. You really didn't know about the hidden compartment in the box." What? Everyone's eyes immediately turned to look at Chen Ning. The Imperial Guard's faces were filled with confusion and bewilderment. Even Mo Chuan's eyes became unfathomable. The Northern Qi envoy's eyes lit up. He had already lost all hope, but Chen Ning's words were like a drowning man suddenly finding a rope to save his life. He didn't hesitate to grab onto it. Really? Empress, do you believe my words? His eyes were filled with tears as he looked at Chen Ning with gratitude in his eyes. At this moment, he really wanted to kneel down and kowtow to her. Mo Chuan couldn't help but turn to look at Chen Ning. He asked in a puzzled voice, "Ning, what do you mean? Do you really believe him? He didn't hide the blueprint on purpose." Now that the facts were right in front of them and all the evidence pointed to the Northern Qi envoy, Chen Ning spoke up for him. Even though Mo Chuan thought he understood Chen Ning, he couldn't guess what she was thinking. "I believe him," Chen Ning said in a confident tone. From the moment she entered the door, she had been observing the Northern Qi envoy's expression. She didn't miss a single detail. From his arrogance at the beginning, to his surprise when he found the blueprint, to his panic when he was accused, it was all very real. There was no trace of it being fake. If he wanted to lie to her, it would be impossible for him to hide it from her sharp eyes. Mo Chuan frowned and looked deeply at Chen Ning. He had thought that Chen Ning finding the hidden compartment in the box would prove that this matter had nothing to do with West Chu and that it was all the Northern Qi envoy's doing. But now she was actually speaking up for the Northern Qi envoy. Could it be that she had guessed who really wanted to steal the blueprint? "Ning, I want to know why this blueprint appeared in the hidden compartment in the box. Who is the real thief? Is that black-clothed masked man real or fake?" he asked in a deep voice. In reality, he found that she already had a plan for finding the blueprint in the box. This girl was keeping him in suspense again. Chen Ning combed her hair and gave him an apologetic smile. "You have too many questions, I'll answer them one at a time. Mo Chuan, I'm not keeping you in suspense. I'm just not sure if I can find the blueprint in the envoy's room. I'm just making a simple guess. If someone really broke into the post house that night and drugged everyone, and if there really was a black-clothed and masked thief, then when they caught him, they found the sleeping incense on his body and the blueprint was indeed stolen. However, they couldn't find the blueprint on the thief's body, and there was nothing in the honorable envoy's room either. In that case, could the blueprint have disappeared without a trace? Mo Chien, Qi envoy, and Chuan, this is obviously impossible because he was discovered as soon as he left the room. He didn't have the chance to move the stolen goods. If that's the case, where would the blueprint be? Her eyes were sparkling, and her voice was crisp and sweet. Everyone was attracted by her words and thought, yes, where could this blueprint be? Chapter 1161. Although everyone already knew the answer, they still couldn't help but widen their eyes and stare at her without blinking. Actually, this is a very simple question. Every corner of the room has been searched, but there is only one place that hasn't been searched, and that is the box with the blueprint. It is also the only place where he could have hidden the blueprint, so he brought a thin partition and sealed the blueprint under it. Then he covered it with satin. When the honorable envoy opened the box, the first thing he saw was that the blueprint had disappeared. Everyone thought that the blueprint had been stolen, but in reality, the blueprint was still in the box and hadn't been taken out of the room. After Chen Ning finished speaking, everyone let out sounds of realization. So it's like this. But the Northern Qi envoy's forehead was dripping with sweat, and he couldn't help wiping it off with his sleeve. The Empress' words, word by word, were still pushing him into a pit. Even after hearing these words, he felt that this matter had something to do with him. But why would the thief do this? His goal wasn't to steal the blueprint, but to create the illusion that the blueprint had been stolen, right? Mo Chuan went straight to the point, his cold gaze sweeping over the Northern Qi envoy. The Northern Qi envoy didn't dare raise his head under his gaze. He didn't do it, but he couldn't defend himself. The thief's intentions are indeed thought-provoking. His goal might be the blueprint, or it might not be the blueprint, because after the blueprint was stolen, this matter would definitely cause a huge uproar, and the entire city would be investigated. He was worried that the blueprint would be found if he brought it back to his side, so he left it in a safe place. And what is the safest place? Naturally, it's something that no one would have thought of, and that's this golden box. When the matter has passed and the thieves can't be caught and the blueprint is nowhere to be found, the honorable envoy naturally won't keep this useless box. It's very likely that he'll throw it aside. When that time comes, he'll retrieve this box and take out the blueprint that's hidden in the middle of the box. Wouldn't that be without anyone knowing? As soon as Chen Ning's voice fell, there was a wave of praise from all around. Mo Chuan looked at her with a warm and admiring gaze, his heart filled with admiration. This girl really was smart. Such a complicated scheme, such a deep scheme, but she seemed to have seen it with her own eyes. She described it in detail, and it was incomparably clear. Then doesn't that mean the person who stole the blueprint is already on the verge of revealing himself? Mo Chuan said coldly, his gaze falling upon the Northern Qi envoy. The Northern Qi envoy's back was completely soaked in cold sweat. He opened his mouth, but found that he couldn't say a single word. Chen Ning shook her head and said, "It's not that obvious, but it's even more confusing. However, this matter can prove that the theft of the blueprint is indeed unrelated to this esteemed envoy." Hearing this, the Northern Qi envoy looked at Chen Ning with gratitude, and this time, he was speechless. At a time when everyone was wrongly accusing him, there was someone who stood out to clear his name and prove his innocence. He was willing to lay down his life for that person and die 100 times without regrets. Mo Chuan slightly knit his brows. He looked at her and said, "Why are you so sure?" Chapter 1162. There is a saying that a negative is a positive. If I assume that there really is a thief, and if he really came to steal the blueprint, and if I don't find the blueprint in the hidden compartment, then it means that the honorable envoy is a thief crying thief, stealing what he is guarding. But if all the assumptions are established, then there is only one result, and that is that the honorable envoy is not lying. He really doesn't know that the blueprint is hidden in the compartment of the box. If I explain it like this, can you understand? Chen Ning's clear and bright eyes stared at Mo Chuan. They were clear and bright, and very intelligent. This reasoning already touched upon the deeper principles of logic. It was a bit difficult for Mo Chuan and the others, who had never come into contact with logic, to accept it. Of course, this was only one of the reasons why she came to this conclusion. The other reason was that, through micro-observation, she found that the Northern Qi envoy was not lying. Everyone was confused hearing this, and their brains couldn't wrap around it. What was a negative is a positive? What was a hypothesis established? Was the Empress talking about the Book of Heaven? Although they couldn't understand, they all believed Qin Ning's words without a doubt. They admired her intelligence to the point of prostrating themselves, so no one questioned her. Mo Chuan looked at Qin Ning, and his originally stern face revealed a faint smile. It was like the ice had melted, making people feel like they were bathing in the spring wind. He reached out his hand and lovingly rubbed her hair. In a soft voice, he said, "I don't understand, but I believe you." The Imperial Guard saw the faint smile on Mo Chuan's face, and they were so shocked that they couldn't believe their eyes. The serious emperor in their eyes, who never smiled, could actually have such a gentle moment. He could actually smile. Especially when the emperor could use such a gentle tone to speak, they had never seen or heard of it before. Qin Ning's white jade-like cheeks turned slightly red. She didn't think that Mo Chuan would reveal such a tender and sweet expression to her in front of everyone. His gentle eyes were like water, making her drown in them. She awkwardly cleared her throat and looked away, looking at the Northern Qi envoy. "Honorable envoy, since the blueprint has been found, can we continue with the deal between our two countries?" This? The Northern Qi envoy's expression was filled with hesitation. His heart had just fallen back into his stomach, but he tightly gripped the blueprint in his hand. His heart was already beating a retreat. This theft had scared him to the point that 3 out of 7 souls had disappeared. It was all because of the blueprint. Now it was proven that the person who stole the blueprint was someone else, and this person was without a doubt a West Chu citizen. Perhaps he was sent by the young emperor in front of him, so he didn't want to sell the blueprint to a thief. Qin Ning looked at his expression and already guessed his thoughts. Chapter 1163. Qin Ning's words were neither servile nor overbearing. There was a hint of threat and temptation, but in the ears of the Northern Qi envoy, not only did it not sound harsh, it actually felt indescribably comfortable. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. He couldn't describe what he felt towards Qin Ning. There was admiration, gratitude, and surprise. This empress might be young, but her words were convincing. Her words were all pointed at his weak points, making him unable to even say a no. The empress has cleared this envoy's name. This envoy is very grateful. No matter what the empress says, this envoy will not disobey. Emperor, we can proceed with this transaction now. The Northern Qi envoy thought for a bit, then respectfully presented the blueprint to Mo Chuan with both hands. Mo Chuan was slightly surprised. He didn't think that the Northern Qi envoy would agree so readily. "Sir, I do not have any silver on me. We can continue the transaction tomorrow." He left the palace in a hurry, and as the emperor, he could not have any silver on him. And this was a large sum that needed to be paid for by the national treasury. It's fine. This blueprint can be given to the emperor first. As for the silver, the emperor can send someone to deliver it. I believe in the emperor and the empress. The Northern Qi envoy spoke very generously, handing over the blueprint in his hand a few more inches. He was beginning to feel that this blueprint had become a hot potato. If he continued to keep it by his side, there was no telling what would happen next time. If the blueprint was lost and he did not receive the silver for the transaction, how would he have the face to return to Northern Qi and report to the emperor? So, it was better to give this blueprint away as soon as possible. Based on the Empress' ability to clear his name, she would not take the blueprint and not pay. Mo Chuan smiled and took the blueprint. He said, "Then I will accept it. As for the silver, I will have the Minister of Revenue send it to the embassy. Please accept it when the time comes." The Northern Qi envoy seemed to let out a long sigh of relief. He revealed a smile and bowed to Mo Chuan and Qin Ning again. "I thank the Emperor and the Empress." The arrogant and despotic air on his face was swept away, and he became very humble and courteous. If the Imperial Guards had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed it. The Northern Qi envoy was grateful to Qin Ning from the bottom of his heart. With all the evidence pointing at him and all the odds against him, she did not mind his rudeness toward her. On the contrary, she had helped him clear his name. This kindness was worth his life to repay. Otherwise, if he did not complete the emperor's mission on this trip to West Chu and was accused of embezzlement, even if Mo Chuan did not punish him, once he returned, the emperor of Northern Qi would definitely chop off his head. Mo Chuan took the blueprint and put it in his chest. He held Qin Ning's hand and said, "Let us go." He swept his gaze across the surroundings and ordered, "Imperial guards, continue to stand guard around the post house. Do not leave without permission. Protect everyone in the post house. If anything happens, I will not let you off lightly. Thank you, Your Majesty, for thinking so deeply for me." The Northern Qi envoy was even more grateful. He was originally worried that he had given the blueprints to Mo Chuan. If the mastermind found out about it and sent people to infiltrate the guest station again, perhaps this time it wouldn't be just the blueprints, but his head. Chapter 1164. After Mo Chuan and Qin Ning left the guest house, they remained silent. On the way back to the palace, they did not say a word. Qin Ning did not say anything either. The two of them sat in the carriage, each thinking about their own matters. Mo Chuan took out the crossbow blueprints from his chest and carefully looked at them one by one. His face did not reveal much joy from obtaining the blueprints. Instead, his eyebrows furrowed even tighter. He had originally thought that if he found the blueprints in the box, then this matter could be proven to be the work of the Northern Qi emissary, a thief crying thief. But Qin Ning spoke with certainty, saying that this matter had nothing to do with the Northern Qi emissary and that he was wrongly accused. Like this, the person who sent people to steal the blueprints from the guest house became even more confused. And the two most suspicious people were the Minister of War, Li Zhixing, and King Ding Yuan, Chu Xiaoyang. No matter which one it was, he did not want to be the mastermind behind this incident. This quintuple crossbow, after it's made, can it shoot 5 arrows at once? Qin Ning's eyes fell onto the blueprints in Mo Chuan's hands. She casually looked at them and asked thoughtfully. "Not bad, Ning, you can actually understand weapon blueprints." Mo Chuan was a little surprised. This kind of complicated blueprints, if one did not learn the art of forging, normal people would not be able to understand it. Even he had to find Li Zhixing for a few books on forging and cram for a few days before he could understand it. Qin Ning gave a faint smile. She had indeed dabbled in these cold weapon blueprints before. Although she did not understand them, there were diagrams and written records of them in her memory palace. "I know a thing or two, but this quintuple crossbow doesn't look that special. Is it that powerful to shoot 5 arrows at once?" She thought back to the books she remembered about crossbows. The most famous one was the Zhuge crossbow. It was said that it was made by Zhuge Liang of the Three Kingdoms. It could shoot 10 arrows at once and had a very strong firepower. The weakness was that it was too big and too heavy, so a single person could not use it. Later on, there was a great inventor in the Wei Kingdom, Ma Jun, who improved the Zhuge crossbow. The improved crossbow was smaller and lighter, so it could be used by a single person. The most powerful part was that it could shoot 50 arrows at once, which had a very strong killing power. Unfortunately, the method to make it had been lost. Hearing Qin Ning's words, Mo Chuan's brows relaxed. He rubbed her hair and said with a smile, "Silly girl, this quintuple crossbow blueprint is priceless. East Qin and Southern Mountain are both eyeing it. A crossbow that can shoot 5 arrows at once, don't you think it's powerful?" Qin Ning blinked and suddenly said, "I know of a crossbow that can shoot 10 arrows at once." Qin Ning blinked and suddenly said, "I know of a crossbow that can." "It's that powerful?" He then nodded and said, I believe that there is someone in this world that has made a 10-chain crossbow. It should be Northern Chi, otherwise they would not sell the 5-chain crossbow blueprint. They have already made 10-chain crossbows, so naturally they would not care about the quintuple crossbow. But to our West Chu, this is a good weapon that we can only wish for. Chen Ning couldn't help rolling her eyes at him. She cleared her throat and said, Mo Chuan, I'm saying that I can draw a 10-chain crossbow blueprint. What did you say? Chapter 1165. Ning, how could you know this? If you want to make me happy, you can use another method, Mo Chuan was stunned for a moment before revealing a smile. He pulled her into his embrace, lifted her chin, and kissed her on the lips. Chen Ning's face turned slightly red. She broke free from his embrace and said with a serious expression, Mo Chuan, I'm not joking with you. I'm serious, let me see this blueprint. She took the 5 repeating crossbow blueprint from his hands and carefully looked over it, comparing it with the blueprint of the Zhuge repeating crossbow in her mind. She quickly found that this 5 repeating crossbow was small and light, making it very easy for a single person to use. Although the Zhuge repeating crossbow could shoot 10 arrows at once, its weakness was obvious. It was too heavy and needed 2 or even 3 people to use it. She couldn't help thinking that perhaps there was a way to combine the advantages of these 2 crossbows. She unknowingly became lost in thought. We're about to enter the palace. Ning, who are you going to interrogate first? Li Zhixing or Chu Xiaoyang? Mo Chuan looked at the palace gates coming closer and closer and his heart became heavy. One was his most valued minister, and the other was his blood-related nephew. But one of these 2 people had betrayed him. No matter who it was, he did not want to face them. But this mystery would soon be revealed. Chen Ning had just thought of a clue, but she didn't have time to think about it. Hearing this, she looked up and thought about it for a bit. Chu Xiaoyang. She quietly said this name without any fluctuations in her voice, just like she was talking about a stranger. Mo Chuan was a bit surprised, but he didn't say anything and just looked at her with a deep gaze. Relax, with me by your side, he definitely won't touch a single finger of yours. He firmly said. No, Mo Chuan, when I see him in a bit, I hope you won't be there. No. Mo Chuan immediately shook his head. If I'm not there, what if he hurts you? With his personality, he won't care. Mo Chuan, listen to me. Chen Ning placed her index finger on his lips. I'll act according to the situation, I won't let him hurt me. If you're there, his emotions will become unstable after seeing you and it will affect my judgment, so I have to see him alone. Believe me, I will protect myself. Did you forget the peacock tail you gave me? The little needles on it aren't something to be trifled with. If he dares to be rude to me, I'll let him have a taste of these needles. Mo Chuan still shook his head. No, Ning, I can promise you anything, but I can't do this. Chu Xiaoyang's martial arts are very high, so if he suddenly attacks, you won't be able to react at all. Even if you have the peacock tail, it won't be foolproof, so I'm not assured. Chen Ning knew that he was worried about her and her heart filled with warmth. With a faint smile, she said, You're being this good to me, is it because you want me to repay you with my body? Mo Chuan, I've already married you, so I'm already yours. You don't need to say these kinds of sweet words to coax me. Mo Chuan's heart filled with sweetness, but he pretended to be angry as he said, Do you think I'm saying sweet words? He grabbed her arms and pretended to be angry. Chen Ning giggled, Lord husband, please calm your anger. This little girl won't dare speak nonsense anymore. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.